Welcome to We Do, the officially unofficial podcast for Watchmen on HBO. I'm Jim.
I'm Aaron.
And we have seen Season 1, Episode 9, the season finale, maybe series finale of Watchmen, See How They Fly, more than once now.
Motion to rename the podcast We Did.
We did. We have to, yeah. After seeing it a few times, what is your impression, I guess, of this episode and then maybe a little bit overall of the season and how those things fit together?
I don't remember if we talked about this last week because I know it's a very long podcast. But in my experience with Lindelof, of course, I didn't stay with Lost till the end. I abandoned it after I finished season 2, thinking that, I'm not sure about this. Could be another X-Files. But I did watch The Leftovers, and most of the Leftovers seasons followed similar to like a Wire trajectory, where like the most explosive and amazing and jaw-dropping episode was like the penultimate, and then the finale was inevitably still very, very good, but it was almost all like emotional payoff. Mm-hmm. And delivering the emotional payload that all the previous awesome stuff led up to. And I felt like that there was a little bit of that in this episode, that this wasn't maybe as jaw-dropping and amazing and tight as even the episode that came before it. A lot of this was like inevitable work through of the stuff that they set in motion in the previous episodes. But, you know, like I think there was a lot of emotional payoff, and especially with Dr. Manhattan and Angela. You know, one of the formative experiences of Dr. Manhattan, the last human emotion or moment he had was being abandoned by the woman he loved to his fate, that she couldn't bear to watch him being ripped apart, so he had to endure that alone. Yeah. So it's a really emotional experience to have Dr. Manhattan with all of his power keep his wife nearby so that she can be, because he doesn't want to die alone again. Mm-hmm. And if you, to the extent that you know Dr. Manhattan's character and you remember that, and you know the whole like I'm you know, where are you at this moment? I'm every possible moment that we ever spent together simultaneously. I mean, that's all. I mean, I'm kind of getting choked up remembering it. So like all that stuff really hit. There's a couple of things that didn't quite connect, and like it's kind of a bummer that Looking Glass felt like that he was really kind of superfluous in the last episode.
Oh, yeah, completely.
And you know, for the joke meme, the Lube Man, you know, that we essentially get a single page PDF send off for him and the PD files. But yeah, I mean, I really like it. I think this is an amazing accomplishment. Like when I think back of like what Damon Lindelof wanted to do, is he wanted to do something that honored the original Watchmen and generated the same kind of feelings and emotions the people that reading that felt. And I felt like he did. This is a very fresh take on Watchmen that felt very Watchmen and felt as important in 2019 as the original did in 85. Yeah,
and you kind of understated how much he wanted to also make something unique. You know, he talks a lot about how he didn't want to simply rerun the formula, you know, like an Adrian Veidt rerunning this Squid formula. Mm-hmm. And I think, he nailed that. It felt, like you said, very much Watchmen, but also very much its own thing. There's a lot of stuff. So I think this is a really great finale for a really great season of television. It's probably not going to hit my top 3. Those are a lock until I see something that really blows me away.
Right.
Though this did for a lot of people, and I can understand why to a large degree. But I do think that in the end, I had some big questions that I didn't feel were answered within the show, particularly around Ozymandias. I feel like this show got 90% of the way to its finish line on a couple of threads, and 100% of the way on some other threads. Like you mentioned the Angela and Dr. Manhattan stuff, which I thought was awesome, but the Angela and Will stuff, and just the Angela and Angela stuff, the Angela and Sister Knight stuff, I thought was really, really strong. And I think they got to the end zone with that one. Mm-hmm. But I look at stuff like Ozymandias, and I start to think, did they connect all the dots on that? Because it took me listening to the podcast and listening to Damon Lindelof explain what the hell is going on on Europa through the entire series for me to actually get what they were going for. Because Damon Lindelof in the podcast says that this play that we sort of think is dropped halfway through the season, right? It's like, oh, he's writing this play, he's performing this play. Well, now his focus has shifted to escaping.
Right.
Damon Lindelof says
because like, before you explain it, because like that was my what I surmised about the Europa stuff is that Ozymandias is originally thrilled to be there because it's someplace that he can indulge in his narcissism and he can see a perfect society and he could see like, you know, what, I mean, if he bent his mind to organizing these individuals and inspiring them, what could he do? And then he quickly grew, you know, impatient with the limitations of these people and the monotony of dealing with these like, you know, altruistic people. And he slowly started to go crazy and realized he had no way out. And then knowing that he you know, with his genius mind, he knew exactly the date and time that Lady Trieu was going to get a satellite there to lay eyes on Dr. Manhattan. So that gave him something to work for. Like
you're 100% right on all of that.
And that's the thing is like and like, you know, the fact that he had to gauge like that wasn't just the 90 millionth time that the satellite had gone around Europa. That was the very first time it activated.
Yes.
I think you're supposed to understand. Okay. So
because
like,
she was looking for Dr. Manhattan, certainly. Yeah.
But like what Lindelof said about how important the play about the watchmaker's son, like I don't I don't think that made it to the screen, in my opinion.
I agree 100%. What he says is that everything we see is part of that play. And Ozymandias wrote all of the stuff that happens on Europa. And that's part of keeping himself sane, right? That's part of the stuff that we got from the screen. But what I didn't understand until listening to him say that is that the play wasn't dropped. The play was executed. It was just executed in a way that I didn't quite realize.
Yeah, I mean, I think I like the fact, because to me, like, it's possible to play a game of chess against yourself where you make the best play and then you go sit down inside a table and it's like, okay, if this happened to me, and you make the best play and you make the bet. And, you know, the other way you can play chess against yourself is the stupid way, which is you just have one side kick the other's ass.
Sure.
I feel like if Ozymandias didn't have a worthy opponent, it's because he didn't give the game warden material to work with. And I don't know. I mean,
maybe he's missing all of his major pieces, right?
Yeah, and
maybe Phillips and Crookshanks, just as a creation of Dr. Manhattan, aren't up to the task. Period.
Could be, but
because they don't have that sort of self-preservation bone, right?
Yeah, but if you went and told the game warden, like, you know, hey, I'm going to do this next thing, and here's how you could stop me, and then he has to think, like, I don't know. It felt like everything felt petty and mean-spirited, which, you know, if you're talking about a raging narcissist, that's fine. But like I don't know. It seems crazy to me. Like what is with the tomato trees? What's with the smashing on his face? What's with the rich? Like, I thought, to me, it's more interesting if that was just like literally like some kind of primitive criminal justice system of these utopian empaths come up with. Like, this is the worst punishment they can think of, you know, to like earnestly beg someone to follow the rules, and when they don't, smash a tomato in their face. Like, that's their idea of the death penalty. That stuff is really fucking cool. But like the fact that Ozymandias scripted it all out.
Yeah, and not understanding that led to a fundamental misunderstanding of Adrian Veidt until the very end of this season on my part.
So how did your understanding change then, I guess?
So I thought over the course of this experience on Europa, he was coming to some realization about his former actions. You know, the squid and killing 3 million people, and the tear that he was shedding was over that. It turns out, and this is an extremely hard thing, I think, to convey on screen without just saying it, is Ozymandias was trying to elicit that emotion from himself, and he failed. And that's what the tear is about. And this is what Lindelof says in the podcast. I fundamentally misunderstood that moment. But until we got to the finale, and he goes right back to doing the exact same thing he was doing after killing Lady Trieu, or trying to before he gets arrested. Then I finally understood what that moment was. And I guess that works in retrospect, but it was very confusing in the moment. And I don't feel like the other half of that, the part where he wrote everything happening there, actually made it into the final product.
Yeah, I could be mangling this, but wasn't there also a quote from Alexander the Great about, like, he thought about all the worlds that have yet to be discovered, and all the peoples that he would never meet, and he wept that he wouldn't be given a chance to conquer them?
I think that's
like,
right.
That's like, is that like Ozymandias saying, like, yeah, I'm just never going to develop this empathy thing. Like, I thought this would be some kind of cleansing thing. I thought this would get me, because I do think that maybe he sees that as a flaw. Like that he's smart enough to recognize himself as flawed, and like his whole shtick is, I'm going to eliminate every human weakness from me. I'm going to be like the perfect human. But a perfect human that can't like empathize with his fellow man or understand the way they tick enough to, guide them properly or control them properly. I see that as a weakness, but it's like one of those things where it's like, well, how are you going to fix it? How would you possibly fix the fact that you just don't have empathy, or that you think you're better than everyone?
No, he's a bit of a sociopath.
Yeah.
In his ego, his arrogance, his narcissism.
Yeah, and clearly didn't learn a damn thing, because like what he said to the game warden is so fucking cruel in context.
Right? Was I master? Was I worthy adversary?
No. And then after he dies, like it would have been like if he says no, and then they said, "But you put on a hell of a show." That but he goes no, and then the guy dies, and as he walks away, he mutters, "But you put on a hell of a show." Like,
yeah.
What an asshole.
But then there are other moments that I think absolutely land. Like I talked, I briefly mentioned the Angela Sister Knight stuff, which is wrapped up in the Angela Will stuff. And I think by the end of this, the concept of masks, they've done so much with them throughout this series. And I think really bringing it home with that scene with Will and Angela at the end was perfect. And it said everything it needed to say. And then it also encouraged us to say, okay, how is this person who is still healing, she just took off the mask very recently, and she's still healing. What if she gets these powers? What is she going to do with them? I think those are all the kinds of questions we're asking at the end, as opposed to like, is she or isn't she the new Dr. Manhattan? I think that's a less interesting question.
Well, it is also because it's like the question. So the question is, what would a wounded, damaged, traumatized person do with the powers of Dr. Manhattan? Like Dr. Manhattan himself was but one who wounded, traumatized person.
It's key though that she understands that now, right? She didn't before. When she was putting on the Sister Night costume, she had no fucking idea why she was doing it. She was just angry.
Yeah.
Turns out, that's fear, that's hurt.
Yeah.
And now she understands that she's got this pain. And I think that's the key, right? Like she's a little more enlightened than a lot of people would be, 2 episodes ago. So yeah, what does that kind of person do with those powers? I feel like Lady Trieu in some ways was a this episode version of Angela. And I don't know that I really wanted to see what she would do with those powers. She says she's going to do good things with them, but does she understand what she's getting into well enough to actually do that? I don't know.
Yeah, there's a reason why the show cuts as her foot touches the water, because if that frame went a second longer, you open up an enormous can of worms that have to be answered, and the implications have to be pondered. And now, like it's like like scientists say, you can't ever see back past the Big Bang. Like this is like that in the future. This is Dr. Manhattan's tachyon radiation. Like we can debate like whether she did or not, 2. But see, it's all saved for someone in season 2. And I actually think that's, if I was a Ryan Coogler, for example, and I was going to have the keys to the Watchmen vehicle flipped to me, I would appreciate the ability to make those decisions myself.
Sure.
Yeah. And like have the creative freedom to well, do I want this person to be a god, or do I want this person to fall in the swimming pool and there be no god, or do I want the second to be like the search for Spockle and it's Dr. Manhattan? And I think that's smart from a future potentialities standpoint of the Watchmen.
I'm a little worried about a season 2 because I think this is such a well wrapped package.
Yes.
That if you try and unwrap it and play with the toys inside, you run the risk of just repeating yourself. And that's something that, Walking Dead never got. It just kept doing the same thing over and over again. And I've seen other shows do it, but that's the most egregious example.
We said that a lot in the Leftovers. Like, sure, you want more, but holy cow, every time you go back, it's like you risk, as you said, just repeating yourself or diluting the impact of what you've already got.
Yeah.
Watchmen, certainly this is not like this is not like a plot driven show where, and I think those are kind of the easiest ones. The ones that are emotionally driven, like, you know, The Leftovers, are harder to tell. And it's easier to kind of get into those kind of ruts. So I think it's almost, you know, I saw these headlines about like that this show gained audience over time, and its finale was the largest audience it ever had, and like HBO is considering it kind of like a success. Like it seems almost inevitable that there will be another one.
I think you're right. I don't know if Damon Lindelof is going to be involved. I really believe him when he says I need an idea before I can say whether I'm in or out.
Yeah.
Because he does not seem like a guy who just writes for the sake of writing something.
Sure.
He writes when he feels the
and he's
need
also
to
like
write.
conscious of like, you know, I'm this kind of white nerdy dude trying to tell a story that's not mine, and I'd feel a lot more comfortable if there was somebody helming this that had a personal relationship with this material. Like, I'm just a guy who's read a couple articles and has kind of walked away shell shocked and horrified by what I read. Like, but it's not my experience, you know. Like, I'm trying to I'm trying to be the John the Baptist for a black man or woman that will come before me, and I'll prep the white audience to receive their message. But I don't need to be the guy that's delivering it. And I think
what you just said is a portion of the equation that needed to be there too, like prepping the white audience. Like, because I can very easily see a version of the Black Wall Street thing that would not have shocked me the way that the episode 1 of this series did.
Sure.
As someone who was completely unfamiliar with it, right?
Yeah.
If you come to this material with a sort of familiarization and not understanding sort of the perspective of the people who didn't know anything about it, you run the risk of sort of underplaying it, I think, in a weird way to them.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, Damon Lindelof absolutely could not have written this show himself. And I'm super glad that he acknowledged that day one. You know, he said it was a bit of a struggle to really understand his role in this whole scenario, but eventually he got there, and I think it shows. Like, you know, obviously I'm not a black person. I do live in America, but I don't have the same experiences, so I can't say like exactly how I would feel if I were and I had that sort of baggage with it. But I think certainly from my perspective, they've done a great job of it.
Oh, and I think we are, broadly speaking, the intended audience, you know, like white middle America who watches these kinds of shows, who's open to the idea
for that portion of it.
That's not going to be super reactionary to some of these ideas. Like, yes, I think you know, we are the audience, and
one of the audiences,
one of the audiences, but I think we're like one of the intended ones. And here's something to what you said, that like you need somebody to you know, like the Key and Peele joke, like that Obama needed it, like an anger, like a black man anger translator. Like this is in reverse. Like you needed like something to translate the anger and pain into something that, you know, would actually like penetrate
you needed a white person blinders translator, right? Like,
yeah, you need the mask, you need the hood, you need the mask, you need the white eye makeup, I guess. And like that's something that like I'm seeing a lot in like progressive circles. There's a lot of like black men and women who are like, why do we do the same work our white counterparts do in terms of social justice, in terms of economic justice, and we get a tenth of the support that they do? Because these are ours. Like, you know, why is it like if a white person says to another white person, yo, racism is fucked up, they'll like believe it. But like if a black person says, yo, this is how racism has affected my life and my family's life, it's like, well, you would say that because you want me to be. I mean, but it's
the answer to that is because racism exists. Like it's a systemic thing, right?
Well,
like
it's not just that.
Everybody...
It's like in group, out group. Like if you're driving and like someone comes up and says, "Hey, man, I need money because I'm destitute and you're my only hope, and I got my family and I need to get in," like you'd be like, "Yeah, right, this is a scam." Versus like if it's someone you knew or recognized, you would be like, "Oh my God, let me help you out," because that's like, I mean, for better or worse, that's kind of how we're programmed, and we need ambassadors to kind of like bring people into the group and be like, no, these people are okay. It's fucked up and it sucks, but I think that's, and then you need those ambassadors probably to kind of step back once, you know, to go once people are inside the community. And I think that's kind of what we're getting with Lindelof. Like I was the ambassador with this message, and it would be inappropriate for me to continue in that role, because if you're going into season 2 of Watchmen, you're not, no one's gonna like be like, what the fuck is all this race? Like we had that reaction in the first couple of weeks of Watchmen to like a huge backlash. So I thought we were gonna get cool Rorschach punching guys, and you're making me think about
so many people did that.
Yeah, well, in season 2, you're not gonna have that. Like those people are so like, now let's have the unfiltered stories and voices because we're into it. And I don't know, that makes sense to me, but I also understand why it's super offensive and off-putting to hear that as like a black man or woman. That,
your contribution is not going to be valued as much.
Yeah.
As someone of a different race.
But that's the white supremacy we were talking about. Like it's not just the Klan. It's just like this viewpoint is the best one, and
it's
everything else needs to be put through that. Like that's, you can't say like, well, you live in a white supremacist society and be shocked when, oh shit, we live in a white supremacist society.
Exactly.
So it's just, hey, we got a lot of work to do.
We sure do.
Got a lot of podcasts ahead.
So
Jim.
do we. Yeah. You want to get into the recap?
Shall we?
But before we do that, I wanted to ask people who just found us by this Watchmen podcast, and maybe you're not familiar with Bald Move and all the other shows we cover. We cover a lot of other television. Bald Move's not going away when Watchmen is over.
It's not?
No, well, for a couple weeks, but we'll be back in the new year.
I just want to go spend some time on Europa. Try to create some new life.
That's what I'm doing with my 2 weeks, yeah.
I bought a large painting of Alexander the Great. I'm not sure what I'm going to use it for yet, but I just want to throw that out there.
You're going to get statuized with that in your hands?
Yeah, I don't know, some novel use of lube.
But we will be covering and updating you on all of our stuff on Bald Move TV. If you just go to your podcast app and search for Bald Move TV, you'll find it. We'll also be, waiting eagerly and letting you know when the next Damon Lindelof series is coming out and when we'll be covering it, because we almost certainly will be.
Yeah, I
can't imagine a subject that he would approach with the Damon Lindelof style that we wouldn't be interested in. At this point.
Like what, paper mache? I'm going to do a hard-hitting expose of paper. Yeah, seriously. I mean, that sounds kind of cool. Yeah,
for sure.
I'm there.
So yeah, join us over at Bald Move TV. We start off in 1985, the day that Ozzy records his future message to the newly elected Robert Redford, who's not elected yet, but will be. Lady Trieu's mother steals Ozzy's sperm and injects it into herself.
Should have seen this come a cornerstone of the Elephant Mom philosophy.
Yes. Elephants inject themselves
they store
with sperm.
The water in their trunks, so much sperm, and then blast it in their mouth. I know, okay. No, I'm sorry.
Elephant facts. the Elephant facts segment. We should have done this. We should have. What do you think of this scene? I'm trying to figure out Lady Trieu's mother, Beyond.
I mean,
does she hate Ozzy? She hates Ozzy, right? She says "fuck you." Is this a little pun? Is this a little like? I think
she does have a lot of hate and disdain. It's probably hate and disdain that she's seen reflected, from him. Like, because you get the idea that like a lot of these guy holding the camera, the people cleaning the offices, they're all Vietnamese. And they're recently, like, this is only 10, 15 years past them being conquered by Dr. Manhattan and the U.S. Government. So like, they probably are trying, it's probably not the best paid, probably not the most respected. And the fact that she could, because she's beneath his notice, come and steal his genetic legacy for herself, and wanting a better life for her own child. It is pretty Elephant Mom, honestly.
Well, I was gonna say, it's funny that you bring that up, because I don't think that's not there. Like it sheds a new light on the idea of a pachyderm mom, right? Like, when your daughter is a superhuman, how would you raise her? You have to raise her as if she's superhuman, right? You have to push her. She'll probably push herself,
right,
and drag you along. Honestly, So yeah, I always viewed that relationship as a little bit contentious, like the mother really pushing the daughter beyond what a normal mother would.
Yeah.
But now I sort of understand why. She is superhuman.
Yeah. No, I mean, I was reading like that the Tiger Mom book that, like, I guess this pachyderm mom is like a loose interpretation of, and like some of the stuff that she put her daughters up seemed fucked up to me. Like, I can't imagine like trying to inspire my child the way she would with some of this, like, like essentially, I'm not going to love you if you can't get this piano concerto just right. Wow. Like, if you get away from the bench and you're not playing as perfect, then you're disgusting. And like,
wow, that's disgusting.
Yeah, but it probably drives certain types of children to very high. It probably destroys others, and
Yes.
has them blow their brains out. But like, it also probably inspires a certain type of child. It's kind of like Bobby Knight, a famous basketball head coach for IU, like infamously abused and demeaned his players, but all of his players fucking loved and worshipped him. Because he probably recruited a certain type that would fit into that philosophy, but it's fucked up, like throwing chairs around and grabbing guys by the neck and slapping them and calling them pussies and demeaning their manhood just because they didn't dribble fast enough in practice. Fucked up.
Yeah,
but he won a couple NCAA championships, so all's forgiven, I guess.
And it
she raised a genius, so she knows what she's doing.
Yeah, which has me questioning a lot of things, because Beyond, the clone version of Beyond, is not a superhuman. Beyond is just a regular woman.
You're correct.
She's as limited and fragile as you or I. So like,
she doesn't have super genius genes coursing through her DNA.
Right. So I don't know why she's portrayed as like super intelligent, and it raises the question, I guess, of nature versus nurture.
That's why I was
how
about
much
to get to. I wonder if
each
this
of those things is worth.
I wonder if the other thing is, like, we don't know that Bien's not, like, she could be super genius. We just wouldn't know that because she's a cleaning lady from Vietnamese instead of like an incredibly wealthy scion of an empire.
Well, every smartest person in the world has gone on to do amazing, great things. Beyond looks like she was not doing amazing, great things, although maybe she has, like, she tinkers in the garage.
I do wonder if it was an experiment by Lady Trieu to see, like, if it was nature versus nurture, like if Bien can be. But I don't know, because, like, there was some kind of weird, like, I just want my parent around to be proud of me too. I want that. I miss my parents' counsel, and like, I don't know. Like, that's one thing, like, I think would be a fascinating thread to pull in future Watchmen series if they are, is like what becomes a Bien.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And there are a million ways to go about that, with cloning in the mix. Anything else in the scene? Or?
I don't think so.
Oh, the password. Why are Adrian Veidt's passwords so bad? The smartest man in the world comes up with the world's worst password. Because
you needed two dudes who are not hackers to be able to break into his thing, to move the plot around in something from 1985 where Alan Moore had probably never used a computer or had just recently started using, like, this is 1985 comic book hacking. And what are you going to do?
Imagine Lady Trieu's passwords. Her passwords must be like 700 characters long.
No, she would definitely learn that lesson. You can't.
Well, I'm thinking, like, every time she wants to remember her password, she just pops a pill, and she knows her password, right? Like,
right. I was wondering if her password's like pachyderm or something. It's something
probably
easy to guess.
Yeah, just Beyond.
Mama's girl.
All right, let's move on to 2008. Where Lady Trieu goes to Ozzy's Antarctic lair, Karnak, to tell him that she's his daughter and ask for $42 billion to invest in her new machine to save humanity. Ozzy refuses her request, citing his past where he gave away his great inheritance to prove that he could achieve anything, starting from nothing. He also promises never to call her daughter.
I wonder if that's Bien. Like, if Lady Trieu could raise a being from her mom's, non-genius stock that is as capable, then, like, that's the ultimate starting from nothing. Because even Lady Trieu didn't start with a fortune, but she started with, like, good genetic stock. This is all very uncomfortably eugenic in what we're saying too.
Right.
But like if her daughter mom Bien can, like, surpass her without that, then that's literally starting from nothing. But it's not, because she's got, like, a parent who gives a shit about her.
You can't start from nothing. When you're born into royalty or greatness, you can't start from nothing.
Yep. Which
you have your name at the very least.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, that's the thing. Like, and this is pointed out in feedback, that Ozzy bragging that he boasted, dude, you grew up in a family who had a fortune among unimaginable. You went to the best schools. You had the best food. You had the finest of instruction. Like, get the fuck out of here with, like, you didn't have anything,
right?
Like, yeah, I mean, I guess it's impressive that you gave it all away and you regained it in a single lifetime, but, like, much less impressive than if you just grabbed some random teenage orphan and demanded they do the same.
Like John Osterman, perhaps.
Exactly.
Going from being this child running from the Nazis to being I would say, genius physicist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I gather from this that Lady Trieu, we were questioning, I think, like how old she is and what timelines and stuff. I'm not going to talk too much about the timelines, but I think she's like 34 years old based on...
Yeah, 85 to 2019.
Yeah, so she's maybe born in like 85, 86, and then 2008. So modern day, she's probably 34.
Mid-30s, yeah, sure.
Yeah. And we find out in this scene also that there is no pattern to the squids. It's all randomized and it's all automated. And so I think that explains how these things, even in the absence of Adrian Veidt, have been continuing, these squid showers.
It is wild that, like, what powers that? Like, what kind of raw material? Like, does it just pull shit from the Arctic Ocean or something? Because I probably just answered my own question. Because I did think of, like, okay, automation, fine, but like, is the supply chain, like, who's supplying the organic material for the squids? But maybe he's just pulling it from the sea or from the ice pack or whatever. He's a lot smarter than me. The technology is also honestly more fantastic than I had imagined it, like, halfway through the series. Like, I thought that, like, technology might be different than what we had, but it wouldn't be so much more advanced. But by the end of the series, we've got super efficient fusion drive rocketry. We've got solar system spanning deep space telescopes. We got anti-grav technology. We got all kinds of cryogenic technology that's essentially perfect. It's for so like that it was a lot more far sci-fi than I thought going into it. So it's hard for me to say.
Very very much in my opinion more fantasy than sci-fi. It crosses that line for me.
Yeah. What's funny to me is that, like, this is a purely random distribution of squid attacks. So of course humans found patterns in them. Like, we saw the reports of, like, there's more squid fall in Soviet and Eastern Bloc states. Like, but it was because
turns out there's
random.
more land mass there.
It's like, when you flip a coin, it lands up heads five times in a row. Oh my God, what does it mean? It means it's a random distribution, dumbass. Like, like that. That's the hardest thing to get into people's heads.
Wait until
I feel it too.
The return to the mean, and Rhode Island just gets shit on for years. It's like, God, squid falls every other day.
99 out of 100 have fallen in Rhode Island. What are the odds?
Right.
What are the odds?
The other thing, so there's this timer put on this whole thing. And I started to question it because she says that the probe is going to be there in exactly 5 years, 72 days, 9 hours, 17 minutes. Does that at all line up?
I'm pretty sure it does.
With the timeline that we see?
I didn't probe too hard, but I just, as soon as I heard that and you saw Ozymandias, like, looking at all the watches on his Buffalo spacesuit, like, I think that all tracks. And then, because we also don't know... Well, we do. He crash lands on the Kent farm, and then he's just been chilling in Lady Trieu's lobby. So there's a year or two of slack that we don't need to account for because he's in perfect cryo sleep, and he could have been there for a month, a week, 2 years. So I think the timelines are... You'd have a hard time poking, since we have zero tying of what Ozymandias is doing with what's happening here, except for when we see him crash land. I don't know how long it takes to get from Europa to Earth. It really depends on what position the planets are in, and also what kind of magical fucking space drive Lady Trieu's got. So
they say we can do it with, like, some tech that we have in, like, 3 years if the planets align.
Yeah,
but probably less time than that.
Yeah. So I did not have a big problem with the timing. I think it all lines up.
I think so. I think it's important to establish here what she plans to do with these powers if she gets them. She says she wants to disappear the nukes, end starvation, clean the air. A lot of things that Dr. Manhattan did not do. And they never really questioned why he didn't do them. He simply didn't do them. And then we move on to not too long ago on Europa. It's the moment that Ozzy has been waiting for. It finally arrives. His daughter sends a ship to pick him up, and he has to fight the game warden in order to board it. And as the ship takes off, he's turned into a statue, the same statue that we see in Lady Trieu's compound a few episodes ago.
I thought that was most of the stuff is pretty reasonably clever. I am still left wondering why the horseshoe. I guess that's the thing. Did he need the horseshoe to dig through the dirt to pry up
like
that block maybe?
Yeah, so there's this cake that Ozzy has made, that
Yeah.
Ozzy has fashioned in this cell.
Is it out of poop or dirt?
I like to think it's human shit, but
I do
that seems
too.
too gross. I think it's just the earth that he pulled out of the hole.
Yeah.
This tunnel that he's been digging. But yeah, I don't know exactly why specifically a horseshoe. But I know that he has been, it becomes apparent in this scene that he has been, giving the Phillips and Crookshanks instructions to deliver this horseshoe.
But not at a
With this
particular
cake.
time. Yeah, because
Right.
this is all orchestrated. So like, why was he overcome with maniacal glee when it worked? Like, was this the big risk that like they were so limited that they would get the timing wrong again and just completely forget about it?
Yeah, and the like what they needed to do to get it past the game warden, I think, was a little tricky for these people because normally they just hand it to him, or at least year one they just walk up and hand him a horseshoe.
Right.
Wouldn't have worked. The game warden would have been like, "No, we're not giving that to."
Would it? Because like, it seems like I mean, we're here at the scene, but like. The game warden was putting on a good show, but he never was really directly antagonistic towards Ozymandias. Like, he was only doing the things. Like, if Ozymandias said, "Quit fucking around and give me the horseshoe," he would have given him the horseshoe.
Maybe.
But I don't know. Maybe Ozymandias said, "Don't ever like listen to me" or something. I don't know.
Well, I mean, Ozzy.
Knowing that this is all scripted out and wasn't some kind of thing that that gotten away from
Yeah.
Ozymandias I think makes it a little bit less interesting. But I don't know. It's just because I've only been living with that kind of knowledge for the last 12 hours or so.
Yeah, I mean, I think I understood Ozzy better, and I mean, I've always known him as a villain of the story, but I think I really understand how deep that runs after seeing this finale episode, and this is sort of part of where it begins. Like, look at the reason he went to Europa. It's because Earth didn't need him, right? Earth didn't take up his plan. He felt like they were abandoning him.
He was unappreciated, yeah.
Right, and so he abandoned them, and he goes to this place where he would be supremely appreciated and glorified and adored, and those are the things that he wants from people. That he wants them to need him.
You know, it might.
And then these people didn't either. It turned out that the people on Europa didn't need him. They simply were there to do his every bidding. You know, he didn't earn anything there, and I think that's one of the things that drives him is like proving both to himself and everyone else that he's better than anyone else on the planet.
I am interested in another thread that I'd love to see pulled in future seasons is what goes on in Europa, because they've had a divine, benevolent God, and now they've had an evil, despotic devil rule over them. Like, what becomes of these 30-odd groups of men and women now that they've had this mythology laid down, that they've lived through? Like, what does that society look like in the last, just played forward years in advance? Like, what... When people find out about it, like when we send probes and astronauts to go make contact, like what will that be like? There's a lot of fascinating questions laid out in that direction, which I would love to see them pick up in future seasons.
Yeah. So
like the other thing I want to point out is like there's a scene where Ozymandias has got the horseshoe in his mouth while he's about to crawl through the tunnel, where he literally looks like a walrus. Tying into the I am the walrus at the end. I thought that was pretty funny. But there's also, I loved Ozzy reprising. And again, now that this is something that he scripted, it's a little bit less impressive, but he reprised his old trick of catching a bullet with his bare hands.
Yeah.
Because even though he's a lot older, he's still peak human performance.
Until they did that, I had totally forgotten he had that ability.
Yeah.
That he was the world's fastest man as well as the smartest.
Right.
Because they never even mention it in the show.
Yeah.
Which is that a little confusing to new viewers, people new to the Watchmen experience?
I think yes, but it would be like the 20th least confusing thing they've seen in the last 3 episodes. Honestly, if they had zero, if they had zero foreknowledge of the Watchmen, if they had not even seen the fucking movie, then yeah. But if you've seen the movie, I think that you'd remember that. Oh yeah, that's how it happened before. What do you think he made the mask make men cruel? I don't think it really worked with this Crookshanks or Phillips guy though. It seemed like at the end all he wanted is to make he just wanted to do a good job, and he wanted to, like, him dying was a secondary importance to him doing a good job by Ozymandias.
I agree with that. I think the fundamental nature of these beings is different from humans.
Yeah.
And a more accurate line might be masks make humans cruel. And I think it's an inaccuracy anyway, but it's an intentional one. It's masks aren't what makes you cruel. Masks give you the permission to be cruel, I think.
Or permission to be whatever it is that you want to be without any kind of judgment or consequence.
Yes.
That's kind of a Westworld theme too. Like, you're Westworld's who your truest self is.
Right. But then you look at the conversation and the understanding that Angela comes to, right?
Yeah.
And you understand that even though that reveals something about you, it might not reveal the actual crux of it, right? It might just reveal the symptoms, not the cause.
Sure.
And I think to say that, for Ozymandias to say that masks make men cruel, I think is a fundamental misunderstanding of humanity. And I would certainly not put that past Ozymandias. I think he is well capable of misunderstanding humans. And I think I agree more with the conclusion that Will has on the whole thing, which is that masks mask the true intentions, your true intentions, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, there's so much stuff about masks, and it's approached from so many ways. And I think it's what's really brilliant about the show, because there's a lot of stuff here that we'll probably talk about in the final scene with Will and Angela, but more on that later.
All right.
So we go to now, I guess, which is like 2019, before Lady Trieu destatuizes Ozzy. She tells Beyond something she already knows, that she's a clone of her mother. And then she unfreezes Ozzy, and he sees that she has built the machine, and the process of killing Dr. Manhattan begins.
The Lady Trieu telling Bien the truth was a weird moment, because it wasn't a moment. Mm-hmm. It was like, hey, I need to tell you something very difficult that's going to be hard for you to hear. I already knew it. Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right. Not sure what I'm supposed to do with that as an audience member.
And they come back to it and say, see, I told you he was going to try and say something.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it's almost like it was, it's, I don't know. It's lampshading, like Lindelof is writing
so
the
many
scene,
times,
and it's
too.
like, well, this is what's going to happen because Ozymandias is smart enough to put two and two together, especially with what Lady Trieu told him before.
Yep.
That he's going to instantly figure it out. So I better do. But like, I don't know. Like just a couple episodes ago, we saw Bien being scared that she was alone and had and she was the conversation. All the conversations she had that's been just a few days or weeks in Showtime didn't imply to me that she knew exactly what was going on. So it was weird. I thought that was not that didn't seem like it naturally followed, but whatever. I don't know. I don't have any experience with clone parents and them being drip fed their genetic memory and what that looks like in a character. So maybe it's exactly what it looks like.
I imagine that was the conclusion of her dissertation, is that she's a clone of her mother or some other.
Yeah. Publishable for sure.
Yeah. So then Lady Trieu's team shows up in downtown Tulsa to prep the destruction of Dr. Manhattan. She picks up her papers at the newsstand, and Ozzy is sort of half recognized by this newsstand guy. He thinks, oh, you look a lot like him. And he tries to sort of defend himself from the guy's theories on where Ozzy's been for the past 7 years. Then he sees this machine and proclaims the end to be very fucking nigh.
This newspaper man, such a central character, framing device in the original, and such a not a thing in this one. Like even the Bien coming and picking up all the newspapers, like it's like, oh, put that in the time capsule with the others. What? Why did we have this? It's a weird, almost, it feels like a vestigial part of another different season that the direction they could have gone to, where maybe Lady Trieu was more of a focus, and we were more invested in what she was doing.
Yeah, I feel you. That doesn't seem to mean much of anything.
Yeah.
There is a moment where, can I get cynical and sarcastic for a second?
Sure.
He says, "Oh, that's a nice hat you got."
Uh-huh.
It's clearly a halo. Oh my God, what does it mean? Let's theorize about it for the next 3 weeks.
The Christ figure martyr
Jesus,
stuff that goes
yeah.
on with Lady Bien here is pretty. I mean, she assumes a Christ pose and instantly gets a stigmata. Like, it's not buried even. It's
No.
yeah.
And I don't even want to talk about it.
Yeah, agreed.
There is this line from Ozymandias. Do you know what this is from? He says, Israel is desolate, her seed is no more.
Yeah,
Palestine is becoming a
my
widow for
co-writer
Egypt.
of those religious books I wrote on Game of Thrones texted me and said, because in the 5 minutes we have between, I recognized that as a quote. I thought it was from the Bible, and I was doing some research, and I was doing that quote Bible, and I couldn't find anything. This is actually from a stone inscription that a pharaoh carved, and it was the first Jewish reference of the nation of Israel. It was from like 1300 BCE, and I got a piece of feedback from Anthony in the feedback section where he goes into it and talks about this and his theory for Europa being anti-Garden of Eden. Okay. Yeah,
stay tuned for that.
Yeah, but it's Pharaoh bragging that he kicked Israel's ass, and among other nations, and that like he's bragging about how he brought them all to an end. So I guess this was like his.
This is Lady Trieu doing that to him.
Yeah, like this is another, because the Pharaoh was a god in Egypt, so like this is another person trying to ascend to godhood, and like what this might be. This might be the end of everything.
Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff happening, sort of. Intercut here, but I'm just going to try and take it as it comes. There's a bunch of high-ranking Cyclops members who show up at the 7K warehouse to witness the transfer of Dr. Manhattan's powers to Senator Keene. Some of the security's pulled off the event to deal with Angela shooting up 7K at her house, and then LG shows up, Looking Glass shows up disguised as a 7K guy. Dr. Manhattan's teleported into a cage, and Keene gives this self-aggrandizing speech where he reveals the panties he's wearing, about how the 7K got to this point of their plan. And then Angela shows up, tries to convince him that this plan isn't going to work anyway, and she's unsuccessful. And then we'll save everything else for the next chunk.
Did you get what I was saying in the instant take about, like, I thought that this Keene was a lot of like kind of like expository stuff that felt like it went on for some time and it was pretty repetitive.
It is, but it actually informed. It clued me in on something that I hadn't yet picked up, and I think we were meant to pick this up last episode, and I didn't. But how Angela got out of the White Knight situation. Because Mike is the guy that was going to kill her in that moment, and reflexively, Dr. Manhattan transported him.
So he didn't, like, because I thought he just burst, he just exploded him, but
he teleported him, and that's what tipped off the 7K to his presence, and that's how they know where he is and who he is.
And that's why Judd,
all of that ties it together, and I did not pick that up the first viewing.
Yeah, and they made it pretty clear that Judd befriended Angela because of the White Knight massacre and that they were one of the few survivors. Yeah. And then, because that was the question, is like, yeah, why is this super committed racist like taking a personal interest in this, black non-nuclear family? It seems bizarre. But now it's like, man, when I rewatched a little bit of the first episode with Judd sitting through the black Oklahoma and like some of the eyes he was making to his wife because Angela and her husband didn't show up. It's like a lot more sinister. The fact that this person would take this family in and show them love and loyalty just as a way to squeeze them like a grape later on.
Yeah,
I mean. Yeah, like Judd and was his wife Jane or
Jane.
Jane, really, really terrible people.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Oh yeah. Even without the Klan robes in their closet, still seem pretty terrible.
And it's just like, I mean, there's like Keene is getting wound up and he's talking about how Ozzy unleashed his greatest monster, Robert Redford, who took our guns, made us apologize over and over for the imagined misdeeds of our ancestors. And I'm just like, man, how can you be so fucking obtuse? And like stuff in the headlines today is like, I was reading yesterday how the president of Turkey, is that the Erdogan, is pissed because United States passed a resolution acknowledging the Armenian genocide.
Yeah.
And he countered that Turkey is going to recognize the genocide of the American Indians. And I'm like, when I read that headline, I'm like, does he really think that the majority of Americans deny that we committed? I mean, I guess that's actually technically the U.S.'s official position,
Right?
That
That's
these
the
were all
only
voluntary
distinction.
relocation projects, and certain
Right.
trails were walked, and some tears were shed, but it was all. But it's clear, like,
Yeah.
we came to this whole fucking continent, and it had a whole fucking group of people that are vanishingly rare now, and it was warfare and disease and sterilization and forced re-education and cultural just like America committed genocide. We did.
Yeah, it's people acknowledge that, but its power structures don't, and I think that's the distinction.
Yeah. So yeah, I think the Turkey, you should absolutely recognize the American genocide against the Native Americans. Like, it can't do anything but good.
Sure.
Rest of the world, do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
The other thing that I think I didn't fully understand the first time through is what exactly was happening to Dr. Manhattan inside this cage. The way that they're able to sort of contain him is they sort of unstick him from time. They have him jumping around to different times, and he's not
like
quite sure where he is.
synthetic lithium is like his kryptonite.
I'm not going to try to even.
I mean, it's superhero
explain
logic.
how
It
it
tracks.
goes, right. But yeah, the idea that his mind is just sort of jumping around, and he can't quite grasp onto the moment in order to do anything. Which there's the fair question of, could he do anything anyway?
Yeah.
If he was never able to do anything, and we talked about that ad nauseum last episode. But it was nice to at least understand what this device was intended to do, other than just like magically contain him. So then, I mean, the internet is losing its shit, rightfully so, over Joe Keene's panties, which are truly excellent. Like, I did not see that coming, that he would be wearing
the Dr. Manhattan
the Dr.
pants.
Manhattan suit.
Yeah, but and why is like,
it's just overkill.
'Cause
waving
it's-
his dick around in people's faces is just overkill.
yeah, but why those pants? Like, it's like almost like they wanted it was some kind of publicity coup. Like, look at Joe Keene, he's literally Dr. Manhattan.
Yeah.
Like, would he have put in? Oh
I don't
shit, he
know.
probably would have put the symbol because it's a fucking Cyclops. It's just
Yeah.
like the eye is essentially a
Yeah, he
fucked up
would've.
version of Dr. Manhattan symbol anyway. So like, yeah, he probably
True.
would have. Yeah, America
then-
has a new god, and guess what? He's racist. That's what the headline would say.
So Keene flips the switch, and everyone, what he thinks happened is going to happen doesn't happen. Everyone's teleported downtown by Lady Trieu, and Senator Keene has been thoroughly liquidated. Lady Trieu reads a letter from Will to the heads of Cyclops and then kills them all. Dr. Manhattan uses the puddle of Joe Keene's remains to teleport Ozzy, Lori, and Looking Glass to Karnak, which pisses off Lady Trieu because she really wanted her daddy to see how great she was. But she proceeds with the plan anyway. Does not need an audience. Here's where I think things start to get interesting, because the plan, Lady Trieu's plan all along, is revealed in this scene. She says that the only way for Dr. Manhattan to not know what she was up to was to use the 7K and their plan as a smokescreen or
like a mask.
Right. Which is interesting to me in light of our with its social context, because I think a lot of the times, look, there are very much, racism is a real thing. There are very much real racists out there who hate just because they hate. But racism is also used as a tool for manipulation.
Certainly.
In a lot of cases. And I think it is here. Maybe for a good end, but as we know, like Ozymandias asked humanity to pay a great price for his end, right? And ultimately, I don't like that plan. I don't think it's just to do what Ozzy did in killing 3 million people to try and bring about some perceived world in which everything is peaceful. And Lady Trieu is trying to do the exact same thing here. She is the villain of this story, just the way that Ozzy was the first Watchmen.
Right.
And she is using those tools to manipulate. And I think, like, every time you hear someone say, oh, brown people are taking our jobs, or black people are violent criminals, or even, honestly, like, old white men are the problems of all society, right?
Oh, yeah,
like,
yeah.
all of those things are ways to pull on the levers of power to get you to do what people want you to do.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that's always the case, because some people are just straight up racist.
Yeah, especially, I think things have gotten out of control, especially in a lot of the Western world, is that, like, there was this kind of ironic pandering to the racists that's been going on for a long time. Like,
What do you mean ironic pandering?
Like, was Ronald Reagan a racist? No, but he definitely played footsie with racists by publicly disavowing, and that was the game that was played for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And like Bill Clinton did the same thing.
Every time you're meeting with David Duke,
when Bill Clinton throws a rapper who's hardly anyone ever heard about and makes a big deal about that and wants to talk about the do welfare reform, and like there's these signals. I don't think Bill Clinton obviously is racist, but he was definitely manipulating racist people, and now it's like you got people that it's like the third generation and they like are true believers. But then I still think there's a lot of people in Congress that like say stuff just because they're politicians. They lie.
And they know that this will cause a culture war, which is essentially what Joe Keene is trying to do.
Yes.
And Lady Trieu is aiding and abetting him, right?
Right. But Joe Keene also was an actual racist. I think he's a true believer. So he tried to play that line with Wade of like, these racist rednecks. I'm just using them, but
you are one of them, dude.
He is one of them. Yeah.
Lady Trieu, on the other hand, I think is where the strings are really being pulled. Right, those levers are being used.
Sure, because she's essentially allowing the 7K campaign of terror and racism to cloak her true intentions, which could be good. I mean, I'm sure she had good intentions, but
yeah. I just thought that was an interesting thing that the show was also trying to say.
What do you think? Here's a loose end. When when Dr. Manhattan told Angela, "Don't touch the light," what was he trying to? Because I was looking when I was watching this again, like what light is he talking about?
He needs her to know that for season 2.
I mean,
I don't know. I can't
right, because the swimming pool, that all paid off. All that stuff is like, but like don't touch the light, Angela. It's kind of like don't look at the box, Marion from Indiana
Except that
Jones,
immediately pays off, right?
Yeah,
it's paying off as it's happening,
right? But this, it's like, well, I mean, there's certainly lots of light, but she never got out of the blast range. She got, thrown back just like in her time in Vietnam by the blast of the Dr. Manhattan being stripped of his power. It's like, so I wasn't sure what they meant by that.
Yeah, I'm not either. So then we cut over to Ozzy and Karnak hatching a plan to stop Lady Trieu, while Looking Glass has his mind progressively blown by the reveals of Ozzy and Laurie's conversations. The plan apparently is going to be to rain down frozen squids on Tulsa, destroying Lady Trieu's machine in the process. Do you want to talk about this or keep going? Because in the next scene is Dr. Manhattan being killed, which I feel like is something we're going to want to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I had some questions, like in the instant take, I said that I was going to go pay special attention to what Dr. Manhattan was babbling in the cage, and it looked like a lot of that stuff was just essentially quotes from the comic or the series. There was nothing that was new. It was just out of context and from multiple different times, sometimes in the same sentence, but it didn't hint of like things that I thought that it might be. And then I couldn't find anything about like why the squid had to be exactly 22 degrees.
Yeah, it's probably just a calculation that he knows will cause the most damage.
Yeah, so it doesn't seem like there.
I mean, there's a lot of stuff around this, right? Like he susses out Lady Trieu's exact plan immediately, and a lot of that stuff is just based on, like, we can infer, okay, well, he knows a lot about Dr. Manhattan. He's probably thought about Dr. Manhattan and how to like contain him or transfer his powers. Like he knows that she's using a quantum. What was the term?
Yeah.
What the quantum device she was using to transfer? He knows the device she's using.
Something.
Yes, quantum centrifuge. Just
Oh,
without having been told.
When she showed up in 2008, when did Dr. Manhattan disappear? Or when did Dr. Manhattan become a human? Was this happening around the same time that...
It was 10 years ago.
Okay.
So 2008
was 11 years ago.
2008, 2009.
So he had between a year or two. Like, how much correspondence did Lady Trieu have with Ozymandias? Because when he went disappearing, she took over all of his assets. Mm-hmm. Was there some kind of like, you know, how aware was he of like what she planned to do in the loose outline? Like you said, he'd spend years thinking about how he could, if he wanted to, you know, disable Dr. Manhattan.
Yeah.
And surely, like, it seems to me that he is self-aware enough to know that even he would not, like, handle the power of Dr. Manhattan, right? Like, he said something about, like, you can't, like, anyone who seeks to attain the power of God should be denied at all costs. And I don't think he would put himself above that. Or maybe.
Huh.
I don't
That's
know.
an interesting question.
Because there's a lot of the commentary about how the fact that, like, a lot of this, him trying to shut down Lady Trieu, was jealousy that she surpassed him and could do something he couldn't, which I find completely plausible, too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all interesting. I don't quite know the answers. But then Dr. Manhattan is killed as Angela watches, and this is the moment, you know, where he says, "Hey, I'm in all of the moments that we spent together." It's a pretty powerful moment for that character.
And then, like, when he's drained of his last power and he's just left as the human Cal, and he tells her he loves her, and then he's gone. And I did think it was really powerful how she's blown back in almost the exact same way she was as a child in Vietnam. Now she's lost another person very important to her.
So I didn't.
It was a real moment.
I didn't view that moment where he turns into the Cal that we know, or presents as Cal as opposed to Dr. Manhattan, to be like all the power was drained out of him, because the power is what's making him look like Cal in the first place.
Yeah,
because he's not in an actual body right now,
isn't he?
No, that corpse, he turns himself into Cal, and that corpse is still there on the slab. So he has created this body whole cloth.
Yeah. But like, he would, when he's drained, he would no longer look like that. He wouldn't have the blue effect and the light. That's what I'm saying. Is like he's just left with the mortal shell itself. I don't know.
You could read it that way, but
because there's like, you know, when Jesus was dying on the cross or the stake or whatever, there's this part where like I don't know, again, my theology is slightly askew, so if this isn't like standard Christian boilerplate, feel free to correct me. I find it fascinating. But there's this line about how like God withdrew his Holy Spirit or his power from Jesus in that last moment, and I always understood it's like if God hadn't done that, then Jesus might like be up on there forever, because he that is the God in the man. God had to withdraw that to allow the man to die, and Jesus, you know, cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" at that moment. I took it as kind of like that like all the godhood had been withdrawn from the man, and now he's left with just a mortal shell. And since he changed it probably would have gone back to John Osterman, but since he had changed it, it now reflected this Cal guy. I thought it was like that. It's like now you've got the divine completely withdrawn from the human, and you're left with just a human which loves his wife. But
yeah, I guess I was looking at it as a moment that Dr. Manhattan was giving her, not that everything was being taken from him and that was all he had left, but that he wanted her to know that, you know, those 10 years they spent together, that she was very anxious about to begin with, because she knew that they were going to end just as much as he did, that had meant something to him. And so that's why he gives her this representation of Cal at the very end.
It could be.
But either one of those is possible. Then Ozzy enacts the plan to destroy Lady Trieu's machine, and it works. And it kills her in the process, and everyone who the heroes care about is saved by a phone call from Lori telling them to take cover, including Beyond, who also makes it out alive.
I know we resolved not to talk about Lady Trieu's Christ figurement, but
oh boy,
one last one.
Okay,
we have a father sacrificing his child for the greater good of humanity here, as she's assuming a Christ pose and getting stigmatized.
I mean the cross on the wall in the church falls down right as she's crushed by this machine too.
Yeah. But it's weird,
So,
because
yeah.
like they're mixing her metaphor, because like are they equal and opposite Christ figures, Dr. Manhattan, Lady Trieu? Because they both have a lot of that imagery going, and there's a lot of martyrdom. So I just wanted to, you know, do my literary analysis diligence and point those last few things out.
I don't know why. Okay, Lori calls the phone booth. She clearly knows where Angela's standing.
World's most useless phone call ever. Like, you know you're gonna have a few seconds at the shout a warning, and your best thing is they're coming. It's from the sky.
They're coming right after she's had this 7K attack on her this very same night. She's probably looking around going, the more 7K here? I thought we dealt with them.
Yeah, like why can't you say Ozymandias is calling down an airstrike in your position? You need to run, like get within a block or two away. I don't know.
Hard squid rain coming in. And also, why does she need to run? Why does she need to run? Beyond makes it through this no problem just staying in that booth.
I don't know.
Lori knows she's in the booth because she called the fucking booth.
Yeah, I'm not sure why she ran to the thing because did she when she ran to the theater, did she know her grandfather was going to be there with her kids? I don't think she did. So she just took off running for shelter, and that was the first one. Yeah, I don't know. There's a little bit. That's a little bit writerly, I think. But
yeah.
Honestly, this whole squid from the sky whole is that wasn't the greatest because I don't think that I believe that a frozen squid fall can absolutely destroy a complicated sci-fi machine.
Yes,
it's not gonna punch a hole. And if it's punching a hole through people's fucking palms, it's definitely killing like every person. We didn't see that. We saw Red Scare, bunch of like some of them were disabled, but most people were able to get to a car.
They were dancing between the raindrops.
I guess. I just thought that to me, they should have been a little bit more consistent with. And then honestly, the punching a hole through Lady True's hand, that was where it, like if they had left that out, I don't think I have any problems with it.
I mean, there are a lot of inconsistencies. Like when they point that magnet at people to grab their guns. Mm-hmm. There's a dude in a wheelchair there, and he doesn't move.
That's true.
He doesn't fucking move an inch.
Yeah, there's probably
those
nails holding those pews into place, and yeah.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, some inconsistencies, but ultimately, who cares? I read that this entire thing was shot indoors, and that when you look at the dailies and the footage, it's all just green screen. It's green screen everywhere.
Wow.
And this is all effects work done after the fact.
Okay.
Which it makes it more impressive to me.
Sure.
Because I felt very much like we were in downtown Tulsa.
Yeah, I thought wherever that small town in Georgia,
or Greenwood, rather,
set up. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, I've been saying Tulsa. I meant Greenwood.
I think Greenwood's just like a
section
neighborhood of Tulsa. Yeah.
I bet it's not the downtown section.
Probably not. It's the Black Wall Street section.
It's for sure. So then, like you said, Angela flees into the theater where she finds Will watching her children sleep. That sounds creepier than I meant it to. They talk about Dr. Manhattan's death, his desire to see her heal, and how those two things are connected. And Angela doesn't understand yet, but she will. And then she invites Will to stay at her house for a couple nights, and he accepts.
Yeah.
This is a great scene. This is the kind of work the Lindelof does that I really strongly appreciate.
Yeah, and I think he, like a lot of stuff he said in his preseason reading about like Ta-Nehisi Coates, not just a case for reparations, but he also wrote this book called Between the World and Me, which is Ta-Nehisi explaining to his children kind of like how he grew up in Baltimore, and a lot of stories he told in life were like deleted scene cut extras from like the kids season of The Wire. And he talked about his parents and how strict and kind of like brutal they were, the discipline of him, because, and he's like, I can remember like my parents like, slapping me and hitting me and screaming at me. And I thought they were angry, but when I see it from like eyes of an adult, like a lot of times when the parents, they were like, when they were worked up, they were also like tears streaming. He's like, I could tell they were terrified because it's like, if I didn't learn the lessons they were trying to teach me, I could go out and get shot. I could go run with the wrong people. Yeah. I could get shot by a policeman. I could get thrown into the criminal justice system. And it was like just terror of like, if our black child gets out there, like the world can just eat him up. And it's more of just like, it goes beyond the like a parent, maybe people can sympathize with like, kid running into traffic and not paying attention and like how scary that is. And with a black parent, it's like there are so many fucking hidden dangers all that are not obvious, like getting ran over. Like don't be too familiar, don't get too close to this type, don't go to this neighborhood, and if you fuck up, you're gonna die.
Yeah.
It's pretty powerful stuff. And
I bet it took him the bulk of his life to even realize that was the case, right?
Sure.
Because his parents were wearing this mask of anger.
Right. And him trying to translate that between the different generations is great. But it's like a lot of what Will was saying here about, you put on the hood and you think it's this anger, but it's also this fear and this hurt and not wanting to be hurt anymore.
Yeah.
It's really powerful. But ultimately you have to take that off because wounds need air to heal. You can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. That's the really fascinating season 2 type question, is because I don't understand the ultimate goal of what Dr. Manhattan was trying to do, which we can debate in the fullness of time. But that's key. You can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs.
Yeah, so let's talk
what
about
omelet was he trying to make?
This last scene, and that'll kind of inform this discussion. We're shown the carnage in downtown Tulsa as Angela takes her kids to the bakery where Topher discovers she's Sister Night. Then she takes them home, tucks them into bed. Before going to bed, Will says he's sorry Dr. Manhattan's gone, but he could have done more, considering what he could do. As Angela cleans the egg mess, she spots an intact one and realizes that it could contain Dr. Manhattan's powers. She takes it out to the pool, she eats it, and she begins to take a step onto the water, and we cut to black. Okay. Let's talk about the eggs, I guess.
Before that, I just want to talk about, I love the oh, what a beautiful morning over the destruction of Tulsa, and how... So someone pointed out that, Lady Trieu's device with its 8 beams of, destructive energy mirrored the squid with its 8 tentacles, and its wreckage over the town and all the bodies laying was very reminiscent of what happened in New Jersey the night of the squid attack, and I liked the parallelism of how Watchmen 2019 kind of aped a lot of the style and tone of Watchmen 1985, and I thought that was really good. And her eldest child seeing her costume, did you get that? Because I talked about that on Instant Take, how I thought that was a moment that felt like a moment that you could maybe hang another series on. What
Sister Night.
Yeah, Sister Night's kid, what would he do with the knowledge that his mom was this?
Oh.
His parents were killed by vigilantes. His mom became his stepmom, or his adopted mom became a vigilante crime fighter.
Yeah, he's Will's kid.
He's got a lot of that same kind of anger and fear, and him and Angela had the whole conversation about, we know the world's not sunshine and rainbows. We know that the world's, black and white. It felt important, the looks that were going on there.
I like to think it would work out better than it did for Will's family, because Angela has an awareness that Will didn't have in the moment, given to her by Will's 100 years of life experience and his eventual understanding he came to. So I'd like to think Topher would be better off than Will's kid, who looked at his dad doing these things and tried to emulate him and then was smacked down. Is
Lori Blake better than her mom, the original Silk Spectre, or is she just different?
That's a real good question. At the end of this, I have questions about Lori. Yeah. I still think she has this attitude that the comedian has, and we can maybe talk about that when she goes to arrest Ozzy. But
that's a very uncomedian thing to do. Because that's what I think. That's if you're talking about will her son be better off than her? It's will he be better off, or will he just be different?
Yeah. That's a good question.
Yeah, but
don't know that I have the answer to.
Yeah, no, Lori, she's an interesting character too, because she was very comedian-ish this entire season, but arresting Ozymandias, and by implication the president, that's not a comedian move. Right? The comedian
I don't know, because
arrest someone for committing a war crime, right?
So the comedian looked at the world as a big joke, and he took that in a direction. He took that and he ran with it in a particular direction.
But he was shook by Ozymandias' plan. He discovered that early and was for the first time, I don't even get the joke. I don't understand.
Right.
This is an old comedian that doesn't understand why his racist, sexist shit isn't slaying anymore. But I don't. He didn't occur to him to blow the whistle.
Right? I guess. Yeah. What was he going to do with that information?
I mean, he went to Molech and cried about it, and then was just sitting in his apartment and got his ass kicked by Ozymandias, thrown the fuck out of a window.
He was just sitting around.
Yeah, he wasn't doing anything, and I know he had the contacts that he could have if he wanted to.
Yeah. I look at Lori's resemblance to the comedian. You know, she's kind of been forced into the role of the comedian adopted on his own, which is essentially a government goon, you know, hunting and killing their targets. But at the end of this, she's still doing that. And so I sort of view her perspective on what she's doing and maybe the direction she's taking that has changed, but maybe not her attitude on the entirety of the thing. You know, the whole thing's still just a big joke to her, but she's arresting Ozymandias, which in my mind says she's going to take this in a very different direction than the comedian. It's not going to be as self-serving, but it is still a joke.
Well, because the joke is, as we find out in the PD files, probably this is going to go nowhere.
I doubt Robert Redford is going to be arrested.
The idea that one agent and one mask are going to come and say that this insane plot has actually been a government conspiracy and it's going to go up to the highest level and we're going to take this person down.
I mean, has it? Well, I mean, okay, Senator Keene, yeah, but he was working as a rogue faction of the government. I don't think Robert Redford was in on anything.
No, he's not in on it, but he knows that the squids are not like a real thing. They're a hoax perpetrated by Ozymandias. Like it's like the cover up is certainly a government conspiracy.
But I feel like the cover up only really matters if they're also the perpetrators. Like covering up someone else's deeds, I don't know
for the greater good. I mean, it's
like, is it a crime? Is it something that?
Yes,
that you can actually be held accountable for. What?
Well, that's the thing.
I guess the question is, what right do?
There's the joke. Does Robert Redford bear any responsibility for suppressing the fact that Ozymandias killed 3 million people,
right,
in a misguided attempt to save the world for the last 30 years? Mm-hmm. I think there'd be plenty of people to take that proposition for an argument and be pretty pissed off about it.
Oh yeah, and there'd be a lot of people who would defend it and say that look at the peace we have, you know, which it's a relative one.
But it'll be interesting because I think that like the real joke is that the Robert Redford administration is probably going to be like, this is all crazy. This is, you know, Ozymandias' confession is worthless because he's just a has-been that has an inflated sense of his own self-importance. And, you know, Lori Blake was a mask and she's only doing this to, you know, and like look at Looking Glass. He's fucking crazy. Like
it's hard to play off the squid though.
The squid? Well,
that's a tough thing to play off. When Ozymandias' confession includes, I sent the squid and I've been sending squids
and also
for 30
here's
years.
my facility in the North Pole or the South Pole that has a big squid tank.
It sort of lends a bit of credence to the other claims in his tape.
There's evidence. And the tape that he made, the big DVD that explains his plot and what
which Looking Glass is clearly going to turn over.
But that's so the question is, you know, whether the Redford administration would want to cover it up, because I think they absolutely could. Mm-hmm. Will they? I don't know. See if we get a season 2.
Yeah. So we haven't really talked about that scene, and we haven't talked about the egg on the pool. But I guess let's recap that scene real quick. Ozzy's plans for peace have basically worked here. Throughout the entire series, he killed Lady Trieu. Mm-hmm. And now he is going to go right back to his same ways. But Lori and LG decide they're bringing him in.
People can change.
Yeah. So let's talk about the egg on the pool. We talked a little bit about it up front. Do you care what the answer is? Yes or no? Does she have Dr. Manhattan's powers?
I mean,
or is it more interesting
to
talk around?
Like, what do you mean by care? Do I think it's? Do I need? There has to be an answer. No.
Well, it's like Inception. How much of what the answer is the point, and how much of you're supposed to ask the question is the point, I guess.
I guess it's probably the latter. But like, to me, there's clear evidence that, well, I don't know if it's clear evidence. So here's the evidence. Dr. Manhattan said you got to break a few eggs and make an omelet. Mm-hmm. What is the omelet he's making? Like, if the omelet is, we need to make a world where people don't think there's a superhuman that can solve all their problems and pray to, and that they have to fix their own goddamn problems, or there's a psychic squid, then he already made it, and Angela being a god would actually be a flaw in that plan. Mm-hmm. If his plan is, I'm a shitty god, but someone could be a better one, they could actually more confidently use their powers for good, and I think Angela, as my wife, is that person, then that So I guess the evidence is support, but there's evidence that you could. My personal feeling is that yes, that egg was special, and he did intend Angela to eat it because he wanted her to have the powers of Manhattan, and
the clearest evidence to me is when he tells her that you need to see me on the pool.
Yeah, to understand it, you watch the eggs. Yeah,
because you need to have a test by which to measure this.
Right, but if someone takes it over and decides that that's not the case, and Angela goes crashing into the pool, I'm completely fine with that too, because I guess I don't have any personal stake on which of those is right or wrong. My personal belief is that but I don't know if it's.
Yeah, and then the more interesting question is, what does Angela do if she does have powers?
Right.
And that's interesting to me because when you look at Dr. Manhattan and his sort of relationship with time and causality, right, and whether or not he has free will, can he make a decision? Has he made all decisions he'll ever make before he makes them? I think that's interesting because they're different people. And so the choices that they would make, if they're able to make choices, are very different. And so when Angela gets these powers, let's say, the choices that Dr. Manhattan made in the future were all made the moment he became Dr. Manhattan, and that he had no power to change them, but they were influenced by who he was, right? He doesn't go to Europa and try and create Phillips and Crookshanks without who John Osterman was in his life influencing that, right? So Angela would be the same, and I think Angela would try to carry out all of the goals that she, I think, now has. She understands her life better. She understands her place within society better. And with the powers of God, she's going to make decisions that, well, her actions will support that, right? Because they have to.
So there's like this subreddit called the Monkey's Paw, and what they do is people take turns like posting what they would use with the monkey paw's power, and then the comments are all the fatal flaw of that wish and how it would go horribly awry. That's what it used to be. It's kind of gotten shitty, like all subreddits of late. People they're not smart enough to understand the original point and to play the game, so you get a whole bunch of stupid shit. But
great,
like, to me, that is Dr. Manhattan. Like, he went into Vietnam with the best, doing what he thought was right, what people wanted of him,
stopping a war.
Like, if Angela does that, and I was trying to think of if Lady Trieu removed all the world's pollution, cleaned all the world's waters, and whatever else she was going to do, or removed all the world's nuclear armaments. Is that a good?
It's a good, but I don't know that it solves the problem. I think that's treating symptoms, not causes.
Right, because before nuclear weapons, we had back-to-back world wars that killed 100 billion people each.
Yeah.
So
and before that, we've had a million wars all the way back to the beginning of humanity.
Yeah, and we've had smaller scale, less destructive wars as a result of nuclear weapons. So if you remove nuclear weapons, do we go back to having giant continental wars on Europe every 20, 30 years?
Or does that bring about a peace? No.
Yeah,
that simply takes away a tool that people have for conflict. But the conflict still exists.
Yeah, like removing all pollution from the air, or like putting carbon back where it was 300 years ago, like that. It's hard to see how that would go bad in a monkey's paw. But like the temptation of what would Angela do, in the world, if she removed all racist people from the world, would that be good? Do we need that struggle of ignorance and hate versus enlightenment and compassion? Also, it's like that doesn't mean only white people would be disappeared in the world. There's a shit ton of non-white racist people in the world, and it depends on where you live and the context of your racism. It's like that's like with the power of Dr. Manhattan. That people use it. It's just like there's so many ways it can go wrong. Like Dr. Manhattan creates life on Europa, and then like, oh fuck, this is what I want to do. I guess I'm just gonna leave. Yeah, like that's fucked up. It would be interesting to see what Angela would do with the power of Dr. Manhattan.
Anything else? Should we get to the Peteypedia stuff?
You want to talk Petey because this is a pretty short entry.
It is. There's one entry. It's a memo about Dale Petey from Deputy Director Farragut.
Which I think is the guy the kind of angry guy we met earlier that was dismissive of Petey and at that briefing. I think that was the same guy.
Okay, could be. But we find out that Petey's been fired and his files are going to be deleted because he has gone on. Essentially, he has abused his power as the documentarian and historian that he is to sort of weave his own narratives into these what should be very factual, very dry documents.
And also there's a hint that like he's told to stand down with regard to the events that went on in Tulsa as far as the disappearance of Blake and Dr. Manhattan. And he's like, fuck no, I'm going to continue this investigation. So
yeah. And we've seen this contentious relationship in these PD files throughout their existence,
he seemed like a real, like even regardless of how you feel about the overall, he seemed like a real pickle to work with.
Yeah, for sure. And there are some details in here which lead us to believe, as kind of everyone thought, that he might be Lube Man. There's apparently some of his belongings which are now open for the office to take.
Just come grab all this shit.
Take the shit off his desk. Anything you want. One of those things is canola oil or something, some kind of oil like canola oil.
A jug of lube-like substance.
I imagine it's got to be slipperier than canola oil.
Right.
To slide down that sewer.
What's Director Farragut know canola oil from a hole in the ground?
Farragut knows oils. Yeah, but the other interesting thing about this is if you click the words canola oil in that document, it takes you to an image, which is a flyer asking, have you seen this man? And it shows a picture of both front and back. It's a headshot of Lube Man, but also him dousing himself in the liquids, with both
bottles,
as he's running away from Angela. And it gives a number for a Tulsa Police Department, but as best I can tell, that's not a Tulsa area code.
I didn't even, because I saw it was like I saw, because like I called 2 numbers on this series and they both were just disconnected numbers. It wasn't.
Well, this is not a full number. Like the corners ripped off, so you can't see
when I
it.
saw that it was ripped, I didn't even dig deeper to see if it's a Tulsa number.
It's weird that the Tulsa Police Department would not have a Tulsa area code.
Yeah,
but
Lube Man, or the Fog Dancer, as we learned he probably should be called last episode.
Right. I'm super disappointed by this.
Are you?
Yes, I think putting Lube Man into this series without knowing if you're going to get a season 2, without knowing if you ever even want to do a season 2, pretty sure you only want to do a season 1 and you only have ideas for it, is dissatisfying. Because watching this in the future, who's going to go digging around for Peteypedia files? If I'm coming to this series a year from now and I watch the thing and I go, the fuck is Lube Man? And I get to the end and I go, what the fuck was Lube Man about? Where do I go from there?
I don't know. I'm trying to think if there's any mysteries like this in the first Watchmen that he's trying to play homage to. It's while you were talking, I was reminded of, like, because people were like a lot of hand wringing amongst Watchmen fans about like, oh, if you weren't a fan of the original material, you'd be so lost right now. And someone pointed out, it's like the original Watchmen was like that. The original Watchmen is essentially a sequel to a Minuteman series that never existed, and we found out about the Minuteman and had their impact on the plot as we went along. And this, if you didn't know anything about the Watchmen, well, the Watchmen are the old, or the Crime Busters are the old Minutemen, and now you got a new generation. And I wonder if there might be. I wasn't thinking. I hadn't given this much thought, but I wonder if there is like a weird thing or two in the original that this is kind of like a homage to, or something that might. Like it's another hook for season 2, like something's for someone to explore. I agree. Sure. And the other thing is like, if the Peteypedia files are a vital part of the experience, much like the original out of or in-universe clippings from the original comic book, imagine like if all of those like clippings were not included in the graphic novel set of like, oh, well, that shit doesn't really belong, so we'll remove it.
Okay, so fine, do like The Mandalorian is doing and put these in over the credits.
Yeah, no, that's what I was getting. Is like, if when you watch the DVD, are these going to be mandatory readings, or are there going to be some kind of you're right. It's like
there's somewhere in between.
Yeah, and that's why this like this medium doesn't really translate. Which was Alan Moore's complaint about all Watchmen. It's like, I wrote this for a comic book medium, so anything that translates into another is going to lose stuff in the translation. So
I just don't like this from a storytelling standpoint. This is not my preferred way to engage with a story. I think if you introduce something in a story, you need to have that thing pay off in some way, and it can be minor, it can be all encompassing, whatever it needs to be. But to just throw something against the wall and have it stick, and just nothing ever happens, it doesn't ever fall, it doesn't ever move.
So like, what if they paid this off after the credit sequence, or after the credits, there's a sequence of Agent Petey desultorily packing up his office.
Yeah.
just putting everything in a box, and you see a canola oil bottle in the background, and then he opens up his desk drawer and there's that silver mask, and he just kind of looks at it. Is that what you're looking for? Because I can't think
that
like
would
anything
certainly
more...
be a minor nod to it. Yeah,
All right.
and that would have at least tied it into something. As it stands now, it's nothing.
Then people could be like, oh, Agent Petey, there's some interesting threads to pull there. Like, did he always want to be a mask? Because that's what the Agent Farragut's theory is, that he, in fact, they classify him as a hero enthusiast / obsessive solipsist on the Worthram spectrum. That like does his time with Agent Blake, he even had an intimate encounter with her, did that like push him into the like, yes, I'm going to be a fucking fog dancer, I've been wanting to my whole life, and now like, whereas now it's just literally, if you just stick to the text of the film and you don't look at the PD files, it's a complete non sequitur.
Yes, and that's what I don't like about it. They never do
That's
anything with it. It's not a red herring because it has nothing to do with the plot. It's simply a thing that's there that means nothing.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm not impressed by something that's there to mean nothing.
I think you're supposed to so is this understanding fair that was Agent Petey spying on Angela at Laurie's request, and that's how she knew?
I think that is a fair assumption based wholly on the Pedia files, and the Peteypedia.
Oh, really?
Is that in the show?
No, it's a surmisal, and I'm trying. I was going to double down. Like, I don't think you can. Like, there's nothing in the PD files that hints that he is like the lube man. I guess except for what he said, the fog dancer shit. Yeah. Yeah,
I mean, having the canola oil,
this is an implication. This is not an indictment of him. Like, he's got canola. Like, maybe, because like maybe he's studying lube man. Like he's a new mask that he's become aware of, and he's.
Sure, but that's not even, none of that is in the show, and there's not even an inference, there's nothing, absolutely nothing. So yeah, I'm disappointed by it. I know some people love that about it. It's just not my kind of storytelling.
Yeah, I can see your point.
That's it. That's all we got.
Yeah, let's get to the feedback. The last feedback of Watchmen Season 1, Series 1. Watchmen@baldmove.com. We don't plan on coming back for a wrap-up beyond this. This is a pretty lengthy podcast. We're going to consider a lot of feedback. So this is it until the next one. Carrie leads us off with the observation, asexuals, myself included, are always excited when we get represented on television. Who knew the next ace icon would come in the form of a mass-murdering, narcissistic megalomaniac? Some may argue the Veidt is only celibate, but based on his tone and wording, I'd say he finds sex unnecessary and unappealing, so I'm claiming him. For better or worse, he's at least interesting. Yeah, I mean, like, there's a lot of people discussing that, like, based on people's imaginings of Alexander the Great, that maybe what he's implying that he's actually gay, and that sex with women is what he'd find kind of demeaning and unnecessary and unappealing. But yeah, like, I think a plain reading is he's above human sexuality concerns. So. And as far as representation, it's like, ask gay people how they feel about the evil gay stereotype.
Yeah.
Things that are weird and non-standard get villainized as often as not, and that's unfortunate. But hey, he's at least cool. Andrew,
is he? That suit, man, Ozzy's fucking suit is awful. It's like, and it's probably of the era, but it's like a Buck Rogers outfit. It's fucking terrible looking.
It's like if you literally translate the spandex. I mean, that's one of the things I think the superhero genre has learned is you've got to adapt. You can't have like Captain America show up in spandex with big elf boots on and literal wings coming off of his head. Like he's, it's like you gotta, like what they did with Chris Evans, where it's Kevlar and leather and armor. Like that's the way you go. You can't. I mean, Ozzy looks exactly like he does in the comics, and it's kind of glorious
and horrible.
It's very Adam West Batman. Like that's what you get when you take the comics and you don't translate it for the medium.
Cool is not what I would describe it as.
Andrew, for the first episode, repeatedly featured references to the music Oklahoma, going so far as to have Don Johnson serenade his dinner guest with a wonderful rendition of Some People Will Say We're in Love. They went all in on a very specific musical reference based on a musical on the show's primary location of Tulsa, Oklahoma. But I think that the theater itself that young Will first saw Bass Reeves standing tall as a black sheriff in and later sheltered his great-grandchildren during the finale was not only a great callback to the opening of the show, but another nod to a famous musical that takes place in Vietnam, Miss Saigon. In Miss Saigon, a young Vietnamese woman becomes a prostitute in the midst of the Vietnam War and then falls in love with an American soldier.
Oh, it's Pretty Woman, yeah.
The brothel she works at is called Dreamland, the very same name of the movie theater it originally opens for and, as the most part, ends the season of Watchmen. I don't think it's a coincidence, but what did Lindelof mean by this? I'm not sure. But it's too specific a connection to go unnoticed.
It's too specific a connection for me to notice. I don't know. Never heard of that.
It's like I said in the beginning of this podcast, it seemed like Ozymandias used a lot of Vietnamese people in kind of like what we'd call below the line type of roles. Like he had famous sci-fi writers writing his script and programming the squid, and he used the brain matter from a renowned proto-psychic person, and famed illustrators, and all of his cleaning lady and his camera grips and his operators and the people working the fact they seemed like they were Vietnamese, probably because there's a language barrier, which probably helped his secrecy, probably because they were less expensive than hiring, American workers. And there's probably a little commentary on that because, as you know, and then this show can't be about everything, right? This is very much about like black experience in America, but they also had a Vietnamese Asian character that was the villain, and they didn't do a lot with like what the Asian experience of racism in America is.
They did not. They did almost none of that,
right,
for a show that almost should have gone down that road at some point.
Yeah, but it's tough because how do you do that does more than that's going to feel more than just a hand wave? You make this character very powerful, like the most powerful, smartest person in the world, and it's like, we'll let someone else fill. After Ryan Coogler gets done, we'll find a Vietnamese filmmaker and have them tell the Watchmen story from that perspective.
A perfectly legit way to go with season 2, I think.
Sure. Oh yeah, just pivot away from black experience in America and go to some other group or some other issue altogether.
Yeah.
No, have Ryan Coogler tell the Vietnamese story.
Right. He's intimately familiar.
Let's just all take turns telling everybody else's story. You try it on for size. Yeah. Everybody gets to be Steven Spielberg making The Color Purple. Okay. Corbin says, I just want to point out the passcode that Angela appears to enter to open the door to her bakery appeared to be 1985. I mean, we're all for on-the-nose passcodes on this show. Ramses 2, 1985.
Yeah.
Bad motherfucker. That would have been a good one, too. John says, why would Veidt store vials of his own sperm besides hubris? Veidt was probably working on with a lot of radiation in his experiments, and it could have been a precaution in case he takes a dose which causes sterility. For reference, here's an article from a couple years ago. This is a news article where people were giving astronauts the advice to freeze their sperm, especially ones that spend like International Space Station amounts of time, because you are above a lot of the Earth's atmosphere that does, in addition to allowing us to breathe, protects us from a lot of deadly cosmic radiation that causes cancer and mutations. So
I think
maybe
the bigger question, once you ask that question, you also have to ask the question of why then didn't he fucking do anything with it?
I think it's
He's a very old
it's
man
more
at
of
this
those
point.
things as like, hey, how about I get some sperm now, and if I need it later, I've got it. You'd rather have something you don't need than need something you don't have.
Yeah, but I guess what were the thoughts going? I guess that could be the whole thought. The entire thought going through his mind is maybe I'll need this at some point.
Yeah, I'm fighting crime,
And he just
my
never
balls
found the
get ripped
occasion to
off,
need it.
and then I decide that what the world needs is a bunch of Ozymandiases.
Yeah. Maybe that was part of his plan. Maybe he was going to deliver all this sperm to Robert Redford so he could create.
Yeah. Every healthy woman in America should report to the
Right.
local
Oh,
Ozymandias
God.
Center for mandatory implantation because what we need is more. Yeah, that's why Robert Redford rejected it. It was
Yeah, you need to see the rest of his tape.
yeah,
It's fucked.
It went on for 5 or 6 hours and is very explicit about what he wanted done with this sperm. Fern, with Wade now knowing the truth and not needing the looking glass mask to keep himself safe, and with all the references we saw of him being very Rorschach, and we saw him wear a Rorschach mask in the season finale, do we see, if we have a season 2, Wade don the actual Rorschach mask and take the mantle? Would this even make sense? I mean, it's certainly a way. Like, I mean, Wade was one of the more grounded people we saw in the series. Like, his craziness was well-founded craziness. He didn't seem like he had a lot of malice or hate towards people. It's pretty circumspect about his role as a white man in Tulsa, Oklahoma. He could be like an anti-Rorschach, a less damaged version of Rorschach. I mean, but the thing is like, if he puts on a mask, then he's not going to heal, right? Like, that's what they tell us. So, like, do you want Wade to have a happy ending?
I mean, you could have a Wade who, wades through season 2, not being happy, and then, like Angela did.
Do they need a human lie detector / what do they call that? A criminal profiler on the FBI's anti-vigilante task force now?
Probably.
Because, they got rid of Petey. Maybe that's a home for him that's a little bit saner than donning a mask and meting out justice every night. Elliot says, it struck me in the finale as Veidt was once again bragging about he gave all of his money away, that he seems to have this seems to be a blind spot of his. Oh, so yeah, this is just the point we made about, like, you can't start from nothing as Ozymandias. So let's skip that. James, while I love the series and I'm ultimately satisfied with the finale, its sidelining of strong female protagonists was very frustrating. Angela only exists in the finale to watch Cal die. It's a reversal of the stuffed in the fridge trope, but no less problematic. He's referring to, I think this was a storyline in the comic book The Flash, where the Flash's wife or girlfriend or fiance was killed by a villain and stuffed in his fridge. And that became like, like anytime a woman suffers, she's raped or she's assaulted or she's killed and it motivates the hero, that's a fridge moment. She doesn't affect the plot in any way, and she doesn't gather any information that she could have gotten by being...
Whoa. Doesn't affect the plot in any way?
He continues, she's only there to lend comfort to the dying. I guess it's something nuns do, but disappointing in a cop badass heroine. What was your problem here?
She creates the fucking plot. She's the one who gives Will the information to go kill Judd. She's
talking about in the finale. He's like saying like this. It's disappointing that you got this far and then there was nothing for the ladies to do other than tag along. I'll paraphrase the rest of his email. It's like all Lori did was be kidnapped, tied to a chair, and then tag along with Ozymandias while he saved the day. Then of course she arrests him at the end. I
mean, you're dealing with a male god and a female wannabe god.
Yeah.
What is Angela's role when gods are fighting?
No, I mean,
that to me is like the most important thing. And well, the most important thing is the stuff that happens after that, which Angela is intimately involved in.
Yeah.
That to me is her arc. It's not about like, is she going to fight the gods? It's about, is she going to be able to heal?
Well, and it's also like, this is a criticism based on the arbitrary decision to dice TV shows up into 1 hour plots. Like if this is one movie where the entire third act was understood, like Angela's heroics in the last episode were essentially the climax of the third act, and this episode is essentially a denouement, then like that criticism goes away. But since the last hour does sideline most of the women or has one be a mega villain that gets brought down by a man, I can see being disappointed in that way. It's not a criticism that I have, but it's a criticism that I think tracks for people. And that's how he ends up his email. It's like, if the show didn't handle female characters and heroes so well for 8 episodes, it's fumbling the ninth to be less frustrating. So, the show set itself up to be criticized by doing so well. Brian, I want to bring up the point from the finale and how it relates to Dr. Manhattan's powers being transferred to Angela. During the finale, there are at least 2 references to the fact that Dr. Manhattan could have done more with his powers. I believe it was first mentioned by Senator Keene, and then again later in the episode, Will Reeves mentioned to Angela in the kitchen right before she discovered the unbroken egg. I thought Angela would have had an angry reaction to hearing this from her grandfather, but instead it seems like she had given the statement some real thought. I think this is why Angela decided to eat the egg and why the egg did indeed contain Dr. Manhattan's powers. Will Reeves relayed Dr. Manhattan's words, "You can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs." Dr. Manhattan represents broken eggs in a way of making the omelet Angela. Supposition. We had the powers, but he had the powers and didn't use them perfectly. I believe Dr. Manhattan saw in Angela someone who would use his powers for the best reasons possible and to positively change the world. She wanted to be a police officer from an early age and only wanted justice in the world, as did her grandfather. Please let me know what you think. Here's the thing. Even if Angela's the best person in the world, what does the best person in the world look like with Dr. Manhattan's powers? Mm-hmm. And he says, if you subscribe to the power corrupts, then the answer is never good. Like giving anyone the power to just unilaterally take executive action on behalf of all humanity is pretty scary.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with Veidt's statement that anyone who wants the power also shouldn't have the power.
Right.
And this plays, sort of into the idea that Angela might be a candidate to actually have the power, because I don't think she's ever wanted it.
Yeah.
Necessarily. Does power corrupt, I guess, is the ultimate question we're getting to, right? Like, once Angela has it, is she going to continue down the path of healing that she's on, or is she going to change?
See, I read something that is a modification that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely to power reveals. Mm-hmm. Like when what you do with power reveals what you've had in your heart in a real way, and it's possible to wield power in a benevolent way.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, it seems like you could go through human history and point out examples of both things happening.
Sure.
People that have absolute power and then use it for, like, I think about Cincinnatus in ancient Rome, our namesake, our city's namesake famously had complete supreme power in Rome in times of war, and then he handed it back to the people through the Senate when the war was over and resumed being a farmer, and that's always held up as being heroic. Similar to George Washington, some people wanted to make him the king of the United States, and he served 2 terms and said, nope, that's enough for any man. George Washington, also a slave owner.
Yeah.
What do those things tell us about absolute power corrupting absolutely?
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's a good question.
They're just one data point in many. So I don't. I mean, those are fascinating questions, but I don't know that I can give you the answer. I'm just a podcaster. I don't have Dr. Manhattan's powers, and please no one give them to me. Which probably means I should be giving them to me because I don't want them.
Yeah.
There you go.
That's all you got to say. Joe, if you just would have said, yeah, I don't want these powers, Dr. Manhattan would have come and just given them to you.
Yeah. Just loudly say, the last thing I want is the power of Dr. Manhattan to enact my racist ideals on America. And then
you could have put him in a cage of his own logic.
Bo, the bar Angela's drinking is the same bar from which the comedian killed the Vietnamese women on the day the war ended. So for Manhattan visiting there on the anniversary of the day he defeated the Viet Cong and was informed he was losing touch with humanity made a weird sort of sense to me. Maybe a reminder not to lose touch, and Angela just happened to be there drinking there the same night he... this is an attempt to answer the question of why Angela... That does kind of make sense. Him going back to that night, which was a big event. It was the event of the war being over, him realizing he's lost touch of humanity, and he finds a woman there mourning the death of her parents as a result. I can see him seeing that as interesting in a thermodynamic kind of miracle, sort of the understanding of the word.
Yeah, I guess when I was questioning why Angela, I was sort of thinking that it shouldn't be just, happenstance that they were in the same place at the same time. And I was thinking more in terms of like the longer arc of the relationship, but that longer arc has to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Even in a timeline like Dr. Manhattan's, which is less of a line, more of a dot. Yeah. I suppose it could still be just a coincidence of location.
Next email is Anthony Ladon. We talked about this a little bit in reference to that quote of Ozymandias, but he was my writing partner on Gods of Thrones, which if you're gotten over any bruised feelings you might have had about the ending of that, would probably still make a good stocking stuffer. You can get it on Amazon, et cetera, et cetera. Anthony Ladon says, a lot of people are talking about Europa in terms of the Garden of Eden, but he sees it as an anti-Garden of Eden theme. My first clue is the tomatoes growing from trees. This is kind of deep in the woods stuff as far as ancient Near Eastern research, but think about the pre-modern agrarian notion of fruit. Getting food from the ground is very difficult, whereas picking fruit from a tree is so much easier. Living in a garden that has a tree guaranteed to produce fruit would be like a paradise to an ancient thinking mind. Also keep in mind that food that comes from the ground, according to the mythology of Genesis chapter 4, is cursed. By contrast, in the Europa story, even the trees produced cursed fruit. Clearly, Lindelof is playing with an Edenic theme as we later find out the Adam and Eve imagery. So the fruit of the ground versus fruit of the tree thing is supposed to nudge us towards some sort of reverse topology for this myth. Second, in the Genesis myth, the main problem is knowledge. The humans can't become godlike or they would have to leave the garden. Here, the reversal of types is really important. Ozzy is a godlike entity already. Crucially, he's known for his intellect, so he's got tons of knowledge. Unlike Adam, Ozzy doesn't belong in paradise, and as it happens, he ends up ruining paradise for the innocent dummies. Third, in Genesis myth, the main characters have to leave. They're exiled from paradise, and an angel guards them from returning. But in Ozymandias' case, he's guarded from leaving. He's a godlike because his subjects worship him like a god, but the guard in the story functions to keep him there. So again, it's a reversal of type. In short, Watchmen's Europa plotline reverses key elements of the Genesis myth. A godlike being is cursed to live inside a garden that would be paradise if not for his presence there. The very fact that he is there with godlike knowledge makes it an anti-Eden. The question that I don't know the answer is Ozzy therefore meant to be the devil? A few things to consider. Ozymandias tends to admire world conquerors who are worshipped as gods. This, from a Jewish perspective, is idolatry. Ozzy's link to world leaders is echoed in the final episode when he quotes from the Merneptah Stela. And I had to look this up because this is a stone inscription by the ancient Egyptian pharaoh Merneptah, who reigned approximately 1213 to 1203 BCE. That's before Christ. It was discovered in 1896 at Thebes and is now housed in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. The stela represents the earliest known textual reference to the nation of Israel. Anyway, Ozzy paraphrases the stela. Israel's laid the waste and the seed is no more. Here the pharaoh is boasting about wiping out Israel and all of Israel's children, i.e. the dictator is boasting about his success in committing genocide against the minority. I'm not sure if Ozzy is lamenting the end of Tulsa or the imminent divinity of Lady Trieu, so I'm not sure how this is to be taken. Finally, if Ozzy is the serpent in the garden, it might explain the horseshoe. Interestingly, in pre-modern England, horseshoes were thought to keep out the devil. I'm not sure how this relates to the theme of keeping things out. Here's the myth that explains the horseshoe, and he sent me a file from the Gutenberg Press, and says it's a very weird story whereupon the devil gets captured by a blacksmith. The blacksmith makes the devil's hooves hurt by shoeing him. Eventually, the blacksmith removes the horseshoes from the devil's hooves and makes him promise never to enter a house that has a horseshoe over the threshold. I mean, I'm with you, Anthony. I don't know the whole horseshoe thing, but all the other stuff about the antithesis of the Garden of Eden seems to track really beautifully, and I appreciate the extra depth there. And that's what I love about the Lindelof, man. What the fuck does he read?
Everything.
Yeah, like
Everything.
He just has like he just must read voraciously, like just everything that's interesting. He must subscribe.
No matter how weird.
Yeah.
No matter how like out there and sort of like obscure.
He's like just a sponge. Like every 5 years, he's read enough National Geographics and essays on reparations and weird things about frozen squid from space, and he's like, God damn it, I got something here.
Yeah, I think the key to that is he lets what he does read inspire him, and then he pulls from other things that he has read, which, he probably doesn't read any more than an average reader does.
Yeah.
But he uses those things in interesting ways.
Becky, let's talk about the I Am Walrus over the ending credits and how fucking perfect that was. I'm blown away by the parallels of the song and just a generally consistent brilliance of Trent Reznor's work throughout this whole series. See How They Fly, obviously the episode title referring to the squids and the gods depicted. I Am the Eggman, obviously reference to eggs. Mr. City Policeman Sitting Pretty, Little Policemen in a Row, another obvious reference specifically to all the cops lined up outside of Lady True's experiment. See How They Fly, See How They Run, the squid flying, the people running from frozen squid. Elementary penguin singing to Hare Krishna, whereas Hare Krishna is something specific. Krishna is a pretty popular Hindu god who is usually depicted as being blue. I am he is you are me, and we are all together leads me to believe that this is some interconnection at play, and Angela is now, in fact, Dr. Manhattan / Cal / John. Although if Ozymandias gripping a horseshoe in his teeth makes him the walrus, then maybe him and Angela will fuse as one. I don't know. I think Kevin Smith made a movie about it.
Jesus.
Jeff. So in the episode that Angela's grandmother shows up at the end, he just kind of falls over and dies. As the camera pulls back on the young Angela, we see Dr. Manhattan mural graffitied to say murderer. In episode 8, we see the mural with spray-painted giant yellow wang on the good doc, obviously as a tongue-in-cheek reference to Cal taking over later. But when Angela shows him Cal's body, she says he just had a heart attack and died. These things can certainly happen in real life to anyone at any time, but if you look at Cal, he doesn't seem like the type of person you would just have a heart attack out of the blue. Did Doc kill Angela's grandmother to keep her in Vietnam and kill Cal to take that, let's be real, very nice body? Holy shit, Jeff. This is a lot of evil to put on Dr. Manhattan.
Some nefarious shit.
I mean, maybe Cal did a lot of steroid cycles to get that perfect anatomy reference of a body he's got, and explodes your heart.
Certainly, there's a link between fitness and heart health. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't have to be the case. People who are in extraordinary condition can die of heart conditions at any time. Right?
Yeah.
Cal can look perfectly fit and healthy on the outside and be just a goddamn mess on the inside.
Sure. And sometimes, bulk is hard on your heart.
That's true.
And bulk does not necessarily mean fat. Like big muscle loads.
Muscles take a lot of blood.
Are also probably taking, it's like it seems like the key to long life is eating as little as possible and, keeping as lean as you possibly can. Yeah. And I'm failing on all of those counts. So
same here.
Watch me walk towards the early heart attack myself. I don't know. It's interesting speculation, and Dr. Manhattan's fucked up enough as a character to do something like that. But damn, man.
Yeah. After what he did in Vietnam, he's gonna come back and commit personal atrocities.
Yeah, just too minor.
He learned nothing from his time there.
Yeah, you explode 10% of all Vietnamese people in the country. What's rigging a heart attack or two?
Damn.
Dark shit, Jeff. Let's move on to Lauren. Where does Watchmen rank on the list of shows you have covered in 2019? I feel like I have to put it right up there with The Deuce and Chernobyl. I mean, yeah,
it's behind
real
both
good.
of those, but it's good. I'm struggling to come up with another one that I enjoyed more.
Look, The Deuce is an amazing writing experience, and Pelicanos and Simon make it look fucking easy. Mm-hmm. But it's like, how do you compare something that's about the porn industry in 1985 with this, with giant blue dongs and frozen squid rain and Jehovah's Witnesses being traumatized into wearing mirror masks? It's wild stuff.
Being siphoned into, or memories being siphoned into elephants.
Yeah.
And Lube Man.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, because the other thing I forgot to mention in the housekeeping is we got the Baldies coming up early in 2020, where we're gonna have to sweat. We're gonna have to lay out everything we've watched and rank it, because that's the thing we do. So we'll have to sweat those. Tune in late January to see what we think about that. She also says, "What are you most excited to cover in 2020?"
Westworld season 3. Actually,
Westworld season 3.
Maybe shame on me. This might be the second time I get tricked here, but
it's Mr. Robot. Mr. Robot season 2, bit of a stumble.
I know.
Came strong.
The proof case. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, Westworld, Aaron Paul, the new Pope.
Oh,
I'm unreasonably excited about the new Pope.
Yes. Yes. That show's just so much fun.
It was one of the most fun things we did in the last 2 or 3 years. It's also, I think, the first time that you, me, and Cecily all collaborated to cover something. Mm-hmm. And now we got the team together.
Yeah, that's coming up real soon, January.
Yeah, late January.
That's going to be in the Ball Move TV feed.
Definitely.
Check that out.
And then also The Expanse. I've only seen the first 3 episodes. I'm going to be watching a lot of that over the break and probably be doing a lot of early coverage of that in 2020. So, and we'll see, because there's always surprises. I didn't know to look forward to. I mean, Watchmen has been circled on my calendar ever since Lindelof talked about it. Mm-hmm. But I wasn't looking for like Chernobyl. They come out of nowhere. There are a lot of things that I saw this year that blew me away. Fleabag. So who knows? Who knows what 2020 will bring? A lot of shit on Disney Plus and HBO Max for sure. Travis, it was surprising how nonchalant Angela was willing to take Dr. Manhattan's powers, and frankly a little out of character. A better cliffhanger, in my opinion, would have been for her to find a blue egg or anything clearly designed to give its ingester Dr. Manhattan powers, then end with her in the kitchen staring at it, setting up a more interesting moral question. Now it's a simple matter of does she or doesn't she have his powers? And I think it's more compelling to wonder whether she even wants them in like a ring of power way, such as "Don't tempt me, Frodo" from Gandalf. That's a fair point.
Yeah, I could see that being a very satisfying ending too.
But so do you think it's out of character? Like if you knew, like what could you do to Dr. Manhattan powers? In terms of society, what could you personally could bring back your husband, presumably?
I don't know. It's so the way I view it is this is a god essentially telling you that you need these god powers. Mm-hmm. And who are you to defy a god until you become a god for yourself, and maybe get a little more godlike perspective.
So the one thing I guess it's a little silly is when he says you're going to need this. This will be important for later, like her walking on water. Mm-hmm. You eat a Manhattan egg and you now have all the powers of Manhattan and you need to try to walk on water to see if that works. Like, I feel like that, I don't know what it'd feel like to get the mantle of Dr. Manhattan, but I'm pretty sure, like, if I just injected adrenaline into myself right now, I'd fucking know it. Mm-hmm. If I ingested a Dr. Manhattan power, I don't think I'd have to be like, oh, let me go walk on water to see if it works.
Yeah.
Like, you take LSD, you fucking know you take LSD. You shoot adrenaline in your heart. You don't need to go run a marathon to know you had an adrenaline shot in your heart. Like, maybe the best evidence that this didn't work is the fact that she has to try to walk on water to see if it does.
I feel you there, but I don't. Why would Dr. Manhattan leave all these clues to a conclusion that A, we don't get, and B is, it's actually not real? Actually didn't leave you anything, Angela. You're going to need to see me walk on water so that you can know you're not a god at the end of this. Yeah. She already fucking knew she wasn't a god.
It doesn't make sense in like the storytelling way, but also like her having to prove to herself that she's Dr. Manhattan doesn't make sense in a real kind of mechanical way.
Yeah, I feel you. It's, I don't know, catch-22 there.
James, I absolutely love this season and totally expecting season 2. Although I'm a bit worried about it post Lindelof, I doubt he'd leave it in unworthy hands. As someone who has no familiar.
Wait, he doesn't get much of a say in that. Huh? What would HBO do with this? Is the question you have to ask.
I mean, if HBO gave it to someone that Lindelof would Lindelof could start a big stink by saying this is So I think he would be consulted, right?
I mean, I'm sure HBO has enough respect for him not to
start another Alan Moore type situation.
Right. I don't think they would want to, but they certainly could.
As someone who has no familiarity whatsoever with the Watchmen universe, I was very intrigued by everything, especially the concept of Dr. Manhattan and the questions of time and dimensional existence the character invokes. Oh, man. Watch the movie, and if you dig that, read the comic, because they really go in depth about Dr. Manhattan and how he perceives time, and I think it's the best part of it. My only real problem throughout the series comes as the subtext of this episode when Laurie Blake arrests Adrian. The tone of her explanation, the tone the show leaves that point on, is one that the FBI is this morally righteous entity which will make everything right, even if it means up to and including arresting the president. This comes off to me as a slight betrayal of the show's general message up to this point, that authority figures, specifically law enforcement, are easily corruptible and untrustworthy. The show, without presenting it as a morally ambiguous or worrisome possibility, designates the FBI as an entity to which will oversee this tumultuous period of presidential arrest and chaos which would result from the world finding out about the squids being a hoax. Perhaps this view is influenced by my own baseline level of distrust for law enforcement, but maybe you guys, with your knowledge of the comics, could enlighten me as whether this sentiment of distrust for authority is prevalent in the source material, whether you guys view the FBI thing as an even slight betrayal of the message of the comics. I'll confess I didn't even think about it in that You know, like my cynicism would be reserved for like it just Lori Blake arresting Ozymandias and then it just doesn't work, you know, in the same way that like Will says, I got friends in power in high places, and you know, she tried to arrest him and it didn't work. Like she's going to try to arrest Ozymandias and it's going to be even more so. But what do you think?
So I can't speak to, you know, what the comic has to say about this and the distrust or not that it has of the government, because I haven't read the whole thing. But I guess the way I was looking at that is this is what Lori can do in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And whether or not it works, whether or not it's like this big game changer that, you know, brings down Robert Redford and the government and all the corruption therein isn't on her. She can only do what she can do.
Yeah.
And this is the thing. Unless she puts a fucking bullet in his head, this is the thing she can do. And so she does it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, what I would say about the original Watchmen is like you can find almost any relationship to law enforcement within those comics, depending on which of the like 12 central characters you're talking about. Like Ozymandias has a different view of government that Rorschach does, than Dan, Night Owl does, than, you know, Lori does, and clearly Dr. Manhattan does, and that change also, you know, that viewpoint changes. Like I think Dr. Manhattan originally wanted to be like a Superman type of character for the United States, and then he goes through Vietnam and gets jaded about that. So there's a lot. It's very complicated. And like I said, it's depending on who you're talking about, and the Watchmen would have this. And the overall, I don't think this is Pollyanna, because like even the PD files indicates that like this thing that Lori's doing, it's like that's something she did to be true to her character, and she's probably going to pay a personal price for it. Just like Rorschach was going to tell the truth in the face of annihilation and did. Yeah, you know. So yeah, I don't know. Like I said, you could do worse than checking out the comics or at least a movie and see what you think. But that's my take. Tommy, I really enjoyed the finale that Keene revealed the cage was built from melted down lithium watch batteries, given that Dr. Manhattan is the son of a watchmaker. It almost seems like Lindelof was drawing a connection to a technology that was a successor to mechanical watches being used to create the successor to Manhattan. It's a nice touch. Certainly this show's no less weird than Kevin using his dick as a security device in The Leftovers. Though perhaps that's how Bald Moon's security system operates, so it doesn't seem so weird. Well, it did.
In some kind of dream state.
It did. We had the dick sensor, but then we hired Cecily, and it was a whole fucking fiasco, so we had to rip it out. Yeah. Our dicks, not the sensor.
Just can't have any more fun in the office.
Nah, you can't. You fucking hire a woman, it's just like all dull, and can't make dick jokes anymore, and can't talk.
We used to not wear pants in the office, and now we have
now
to.
We got these black briefs with the wings on the hips. It's really bizarre. Moving on to Rich. I'm not one of the folks who is bothered by the fact that the loop wasn't closed on the Loop Man on screen, but there is one loop that's left open that does bother me. Dan Dryberg was never heard from and is still in prison. Did you see the meme?
That's it. Yeah, I did.
Where they took Pablo Escobar from Narcos, like all the scenes of him sitting in his compound in different positions being lonely, and they superimposed bars over all those scenes and then photoshopped Dan from the comics face on it.
Is that what those shots were from?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just did, like it just is sitting in
I thought
jail.
they were from the movie. Okay, no. that makes more sense. All right.
Yeah, it's a sad Pablo meme, only with Dan Dryberg.
Gotcha.
He's referred to several times. At one point, Keene even hints to Laurie as president he could pardon him, but he never made it into a story that beyond that and the initial appearance of Archie. Yeah, I don't know, because like I don't know what Dan would have brought to the table.
I mean, I could sort of feel you. It's like the introduction of Lube Man, and he never comes back.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, they're not introducing a character so much as just kind of nodding to fans of Watchmen.
Mm-hmm.
But Lube Man is different to me because it's a whole cloth creation of the show. Yeah, and they do nothing with it.
My headcanon says that Dan is in prison because of his relationship to Rorschach and him being guilty, that like as he saw history unfold, that maybe he thought he should have, you know, when he could have made a difference, come forward and said something, and now he doesn't. And Laurie is going to take this deal to chase down Mask in exchange for freedom, and Dan's like, nah, fuck this. I'm gonna be like Rorschach and not compromise. But that's just I don't know. That's season 2. Maybe he's being saved for season 2.
Could be.
William, first of all, I love the show. As a huge fan of the graphic novel, and I think the writers, actors, directors, and let's give it up for the composers, all hit it out of the park. My one issue I'd love to know your thoughts on is squaring how Dr. Manhattan left the novel and then entered the season. Point you made well in The Deuce was about the character's exit trajectory and how we can imagine where they are based on how we left them. And that's, so just to briefly illuminate that, we both talked about on The Deuce, what's one of the amazing things they're able to do is each season of The Deuce took place roughly 5 years after the last. And the genius of Simon was he's able to throw a character along a trajectory where when you see them again within a couple of seconds, you knew where they were, what direction they were going, and like, yes, this feels right. And it's very efficient. If you can do that as a writer, holy shit, it's an amazing superpower. So in the comic, Dr. Manhattan is losing his connection with humanity. He leaves Earth not only to create more life, but because he is no longer connecting with people. In his return to the series, he comes back to Earth to start a relationship with Angela. While I subscribe to A.Ron's theory of Dr. M still wants to get his D wet, it feels like the character regressed to a more human entity than we left the Watchmen novel. I would imagine he would have become even more distant and removed from what he thinks of as human interests like love, relationship, loneliness, etc. What do you think, Jim?
I mean, that did seem to be the trajectory he was on during that book, but he sort of rebounds on humanity with Laurie in the comics, which is strangely the thing that connects him more with humanity, but also drives him to leave and go try and create some life of his own.
Because like the Doc, I think, is a little bit maybe more in touch with his humanity, but that humanity is on the rebound because he's been dumped by his love interest for another man.
Wait, humanity's on the rebound, but he's been dumped.
Dr. Man, his humanity's on the rebound, so he's feeling a little bit more human, but part of that human reaction is he's getting over a bad breakup.
Okay, yeah.
So he goes to kind of find himself, and we see in this series that he went and created life and was disenchanted by it.
Yeah.
So it's like now he's on the rebound, like, okay, I tried the God thing for a while, it didn't work out. And he's now looking for another rebound, and he finds it in Angela. And unlike most rebounds, it actually goes beautifully for 10 years until catastrophe hits. But I don't know. I guess that's the thing. It's like, so Dr. Manhattan himself explained to Laurie on Mars that it wasn't that he disassociated from humanity that he went to Mars, but he was so distraught about all the damage that he had done to the people that he loved in his life. He thought he gave him cancer, and then the woman that he was trying to love as best as he could rejects him, and he had to go to like deal with that pain. Like that doesn't seem like a person detached from his emotions. It's still a person struggling with them.
And he failed, in his mission, which was given to him by Phillips and Crookshanks when he was a kid.
To create something beautiful.
He failed to create something beautiful. Mm-hmm. He created something that was Ozymandias' version of hell, and his own version of something incredibly boring and disinteresting. So
what he created something beautiful is what he created with Angela.
Yes, that's what I think.
All right.
He came back to give it another attempt to create something beautiful by the definition of the Phillips and Crookshanks that we knew, that he knew as a kid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. Final email, Harris. Like all ambiguous endings, I think the answer to does Angela walk on water at the end is it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's not a math equation that can be solved with a proper application. It's a thematic statement, a metaphor. Watchmen is unusual in that it was made by a creator who, based on the combo of his past success and working for HBO, got a level of control over this season that is unusual. Even more unusual is that he got that control and had a very clear idea what he wanted to do with it. The season of Watchmen was dense and screamed its themes with every frame. The show was about the destructive nature of power, and specifically the way that power has caused so much damage to Black Americans. James Baldwin says, if you want to lynch me, that's your problem. If you have the power to lynch me, that's my problem. The Black Wall Street Massacre was a premier example of that, where white people had the power to cause so much death and destruction. The problem of racism isn't that the Klan hates black people. The problem is that they feel confident about performing a massacre and not facing any consequences. What Watchmen proposed was the fictional America where there was eventually some consequence for the actions the racist Americans took in the form of hooded justices, violence, and eventually reparations. Dr. Manhattan is a being whose power is functionally that of a god. In the past, he used that power to do what even the seemingly unlimited power of the United States government could not, win the Vietnam War. But he came to the conclusion after he murdered and terrified so many Vietnamese that exercising his power is immoral. That's the point of view of actual political anarchists, not that society or government shouldn't exist, but that any power is inherently immoral. Alan Moore is an anarchist, and Lindelof has at the very least absorbed the perspective of Moore when it came to writing the show. Dr. Manhattan has come to the conclusion that the moral thing to do is to do nothing. Dr. Manhattan cannot exercise his power in a morally good manner. It isn't possible, and the mechanism to do what the Manhattan can do shouldn't exist. That's why he chose to forget who he is. The best thing he can do for the world is to live a simple, good life. Every frame of the show is about the ways people try to use their power to control others and how the problem is the power and not the people. So does Angela walk on water? It doesn't matter. What does matter is that no matter what, people will pursue power, no matter how clear it is that they shouldn't. Dr. Manhattan should not exist. Angela should not have tried to become him. If she does have the power of Dr. Manhattan, she will not make the world a better place, no matter how good a person she is, just like she didn't make the world a better place when she was torturing and beating people as a police officer. Just like Hooded Justice didn't make the world a better place, it just isn't possible to control the lives of others in a way that is moral. That's
interesting.
So I find anarchism appealing because some of its premises seem like absolutely true. That power is inherently bad. Attempts to control people are inherently bad. But I guess my problem with anarchism is if you don't let anyone make decisions, then you let anyone make the decisions, and the people that end up making decisions in those environments are the strong that can get some things done, and being strong and willful does not make a person good. So that's why I think democracy is a great compromise between anarchy, which is the absolute freedom of the individual, and some kind of rigid top-down government where the people have no say. So yeah, this and I think you're right about Dr. Manhattan seeing that, because the result of that philosophy is extreme passivity, extreme pacifism, and I don't know, the real world sometimes
that's the problem.
You got to crack skulls and name it good, or
to make an omelet,
or only the bad people crack skulls. So
that's the thing. I've been listening to Dan Carlin's Supernova in the East series lately, and it has given me a whole new perspective on power on a worldwide scope.
Sure.
And what that power means and how it's used and why it's used. And my first question is, first let me say I broadly agree with the premise here, that power should not be sought. But given that there are people who are going to seek power, how do you deal with those people? If you believe that they shouldn't have power, don't you need power to combat the people who have power?
Yeah.
The powerless cannot combat the powerful. So how do you come to some kind of realistic, useful form of power here? I don't know the answer. I think that's the number one question, perhaps in the entire worldwide society. How do we get people to responsibly wield power? Because power is going to exist. It has to. It's fundamental to our society. Yeah,
and it's what's apparent is we've evolved to deal with groups in the low hundreds, to cooperate in that. And we live in a world that now has 7 going on 8 billion people, and this is something I'll plug my political podcast, 3 Right Turns, on the Swizzbold network. Something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about. It seems obvious to me that to get where I want humanity to be, which is some kind of science fiction utopia, it's going to require ever more cooperation amongst ever larger segments of society. And I think the next 100, 200 years is going to be the last couple 100 years has been the rise of the state, and then the next couple 100 years is going to be the collapse of the state into some kind of unified global government. But saying that just sets people. One world government is literally a buzzword for conservative people of a dystopian hell. where like the wrong types of people use that massive power to put the right groups of people in persecution and jail to death. And so like, I don't know, because like my utopia sounds like another person's hell. But
and it's an inevitability with that view of power, right? Like
but they're fracturing off humanity into groups of people that isolate and don't cooperate and try to maximize their own benefit over other people's detriment is like my idea of some kind of dystopian hell.
Right.
And at some point, those ideas are going to have to fight out, hopefully in some kind of marketplace of ideas and not a battlefield, but the one's going to have to win. And because like in the old days, like I'd tell those people, like, go off to another frontier and set up your own perfect libertarian anarchist utopia and leave me the fuck out of it. But there's no, like, maybe, I don't know, maybe they can go to Mars or the moon or something. But like we just have this planet and we don't have those two ideologies are completely opposed. So
I've seen how that works in Expanse. It's not great. So that's the thing. Like these, if you believe that power corrupts, and you believe that's always true, then there is no real resolution to this, because in order to, this is the thing. You get the people. All it takes is one person who wants power to take power. Yeah. And then you need power to fight them. And if you think that the power is the corrupting influence here, then everyone who rises above everyone else will always be corrupt. Yeah. Will always be nefarious and evil.
Right. And I think the anarchists will say, well, you should distribute that power. Like, you shouldn't have like a giant like army for a whole, you should have like, like some kind of smaller militias that,
but so everyone is equally corrupt.
Yeah. Well, but then says like, then you're going to be vulnerable to a strong man who like amasses a bunch of power against the social compact to do so, and then uses that to destroy your little anarchist utopia.
No, like, if you have a utopia, it has to be one based on power, and it has to be ever vigilant against anything that would challenge it. Yes. And it has to, without mercy, strike those things down. It has to wield its power to crush those things. Otherwise, the utopia will be at some point usurped.
Yeah, and if you have a society that voluntarily limits its power as a way to make itself kinder, gentler, better, more utopia, it seems like what the contradiction is, they're going to be at the mercy of a society who's more like warlike, you know? And there's several science fiction play, like the what happens when like the Klingons meet the Vulcans or whatever.
What happens when Rick meets Negan? Sure.
Yeah, exactly. What happens when you have a war of those ideologies? And I don't know what it looks like on a planetary scale. I probably won't live enough to find out.
I honestly don't. I don't think anyone will. I think this is a conflict without a resolution. Yeah. And that we will be fighting this battle for eternity. And I think even if you have some unifying event like a squid fall or an alien presence that we're made aware of, that does nothing to change this equation.
Yeah. And how do you if if it seems like sometimes generations of people learn a lesson of like you look at like the reaction to World War II, and some of the art and some of the policy that was put in place after that seemed to be like to try to fix the problems, but then you get 3 generations removed and like, what the fuck is all this shit for? This is keeping us from being efficient and making money. And
lessons are either forgotten or they're used as a way to exploit them and claim the power back for people who want to use it for their own purposes.
Right. So I don't know that there is answers. But it's important to talk about them, and I'm glad someone like Damon Lindelof is using a platform as cool and entertaining as this to start, asking these questions and having these conversations.
And then for a lot of people, it's an existential question. It's not. That's the thing that was most notable to me about this Hardcore History podcast is it's sometimes not a question about whether or not we want to wield this power. It's a question about whether we're going to exist. Yeah. If we don't. And that is a problem that I don't think is solvable.
Yeah, because there's no universal standards of like when it's when is like just war. It's like, when is a war just? Well, I guess it depends. Heady stuff we got into this season on Watchmen. Thank you if you're listening to this to the end. Thank you so much for being along on the ride with us. It's been highly enjoyable. It's been great television to watch. Thank you for all the feedback and the praise and the extra information. Like, we had some really good takes this year. And of course, we're going to be, kind of shifting into holiday mode to spend some time with our friends and families over the next few weeks. But we'll be back roaring in 2020 with all the stuff we've already talked about: New Pope, Picard, Better Call Saul. Stuff's all coming out early. And there'll be lots of movies ahead. We're going to be seeing Star Wars this week.
That's
I'm
right.
excited about that. They'll be happening in a couple days by the time you hear this. Lots of stuff going on at baldmove.com. Please follow us along there. All of our social media is at baldmove. You never know when we'll cover something that will perk up your ears, or maybe we'll cover something that'll cause you to perk up your ears. I had that a lot. Like, hey, you never would have watched The Leftovers if you guys hadn't kept talking about it. Mm-hmm. So, hey, you can follow along with us like digital nomads as we go from show to show, mining it for podcast glory. Baldmove.com is where you find all that stuff. Thanks for listening and watching, for those of you guys watching our videos, and we'll see you in 2020. Until then, I'm A.Ron.
And I'm Jim.
See ya.